I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Town Council of Corte Madera for Tuesday, May 21st. I'm going to do a roll call. Rebecca?
Councilmember Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Kuhnhart.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andrews.
Here.
Mayor Ravazio.
Here. Join me in the salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we now have open time for public comment at the beginning of each council meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and this is to speak about items that are not on the agenda for this evening. So if you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone and speak.
Patty Stolier, and I am representing Age Friendly Corte Madera and maybe the rec department. On Thursday is the senior fair, and I want to invite the entire community from 2 to 4 to come get goodies and a lot of information and hear music and get a free pen and have a good time. Thanks.
Thank you, Patty. Anybody else? Okay, then moving on to presentations. We have a presentation from Mill Valley Refuse Service on the results from the dual stream pilot program and request for feedback regarding dual stream collection versus single stream collection. Jim.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. As everyone knows by now, a couple years ago, the recycling market collapsed thanks to China not wanting our material anymore. And so the price for single stream material began to skyrocket, and we started looking around for a potential alternative that would be address the problems of contamination in our recycling, plus be a cheaper form of processing our material. So we turned to Marin Sanitary. They service. They collect. Or they process material using a dual stream recycling method. And so we ran a pilot project in the last quarter of last year. And we've come to some conclusions that I'd like to share with you tonight. The dual stream project revealed a couple of 3 major benefits. 1, lower and more stable tipping fees. 2, more material is actually being recycled. And 3, there's a reduced carbon footprint for us to dump at Marin Sanitary rather than driving up to Novato. Taken one at a time, the lower, more stable tipping fee, number one, Marin Sanitary charges less to process dual stream material because it's already separated and it's cleaner to begin with. They have offered us a 5-year contract, which means that we've got a stable offer to take our material. That was in question a couple of years ago when we tried to find different processors for our material. We were taking our material to one. He suddenly just closed his doors. And our friends at Waste Management found us, scrambled around to find another processor that would take our material. And they were able to find one way down in San Jose, and that's where we've been taking, our material has been taken for the past year and a half, 2 years. But Marin Sanitary is a processor, of course, everyone knows. They're right there in San Rafael. And they have offered us a steady contract, so we know that we have a secure place to take our material. And they have offered the contract, without getting too deep in the weeds about contract details. It provides a tip fee that is stable for each year, and they can tell us in advance of our rate application time period what the price will be, so that when we project costs for our rate applications, they will be actual costs rather than projections that may or may not be accurate. Waste Management, I don't mean to throw them under the bus. They've been really helpful in the past couple of years finding a place for our material. However, they are not in a position to offer us a contract or any security on the tip fees. They are simply a middleman for us. They're a transfer station. We dump our material at the Redwood landfill. They pick it up, put it in a transfer truck, and take it down to San Jose. And they do not own the plant in San Jose. So there is no real security there. And so we consider that to be a major benefit of switching to dual stream. Another thing that we discovered with the dual stream pilot project was the quality of the material collected. Sure enough, as you can see from this picture and the next one I'm going to show you, dual stream paper looks dry and clean. Single stream paper looks kind of wet and dirty. And when it comes to the other stream, which is mixing all the cans, bottles, and plastic together, you get kind of similar results. You can see it just looks like a cleaner, more easily separated and processed stream of material than what we're seeing in single stream recycling. So the quality of the material is better, and the result of that better quality can be seen in the difference in the residual rates between the two streams, the two methods of collection. For those who aren't familiar with the term, residual is what is left over at the processing plant once they take our material, separate out all the good stuff that can be marketed. What is left over is called residual. That's garbage that has to be thrown away. The single down in Green Waste in San Jose, they report a 16.7% residual rate. Marin Sanitary reports a 7% residual rate for the dual stream material that we were taking them. So using a simple math calculation, you can see that for every 10 tons of each type of material, you actually end up with more recycled when the material is cleaner and there is less residual in it. So the quality of the material was another benefit. There's a reduced carbon footprint switching from where we're dumping now to Marin Sanitary, and that is simply because we do not have to drive our trucks up to Novato and back again to dump them. We take them literally 2 or 3 minutes across the highway to Marin Sanitary. They are that close to our own facility in San Rafael. So the savings is up to 15,000 gallons of fuel, and that price was at $3.50 a gallon, so it kind of depends on what the price of fuel is at the time. There's even really more savings in this, but I couldn't calculate. This is just the savings of our trucks not having to drive up to Novato. I did not try to calculate and don't really know what the accurate figures are for the transfer truck that has to take our material down to San Jose. So that will be an added reduction in carbon footprint for our material. I just don't really know the details to put it in a slide and put it up here for us to calculate. Overall participation in the pilot project, we define participation in this case as putting out the right material on the right week. So it's not just people who put out material, but you had to do it correctly. And that's what we measured here. As you can see, there was about a 3-week breaking in period. And after that, people were able to adjust. There was plenty of grumbling in the beginning, but people were able to adjust. And as you can see, by the mid to end of the period, proper participation was nearly 100%.
Is this all within Corte Madera?
This is overall, but everyone's participation rate mirrored
Mill Valley
the first 3 weeks. Mill Valley, Corte Madera, Tiburon, Belvedere, they all mirrored this growing growth of participation as the process went on. The alternating week pickup schedule caused a little bit of headaches for some people. You can see here that of the people who are putting out the proper material, the green is putting out the right material on the right week. The other two colors demonstrate that some people didn't keep the week straight, and what many of them would do is just put out both cans and just allow us and let us pick up the one that it was the right week to pick up. And some people did get it wrong and just put out the wrong material, and we couldn't pick it up. But even in that case, they at least were doing it right, as in separating. And we realize that there's a lot of education and a lot of you need to have the information out there for people to access to keep the weeks straight. And we certainly learned some lessons about how to do that during the pilot project. What did people think of the dual stream collection method that we used in the pilot project? You can see that the opinion was mixed. It was about 50-50 of people who thought it was easy enough, and this comes from a survey that R3 helped us to create and get out to the survey, to the participants of the pilot project. You can see it was about 50-50, people saying, it was easy enough, no problem, to another group that said about the same size, and the margin of error makes this really about 50-50 in the survey. And some people thought it was difficult, and it was tough to do. The difficulties that they described were sorting the recyclables was one problem. Complying with the alternating week pickup schedule was another, and sorting recyclables in their own homes was a third issue. These were all the difficulties that we learned about, and when we asked what might make things better, how we could have done it better, we get to this answer where the survey results showed that if we were going to do this, if it's adopted, what kind of cans would people want to collect their cardboard and their cans and bottles in? And as you can see, the vast majority in both cases wanted another 64-gallon can, a second one. So that's what we are proposing to do to address really the problems that you saw in the first slide, which is these are the problems that people had. This is a way that people felt it should be addressed, and this is what we want to do to address it. Right here is the can that we intend to we intend to give everybody, if it's approved, a second can. It's the same size as the one people already have, and we can tell you that we knew that storing recyclables for alternating weeks was going to create a sorting issue for people. And during the pilot project, we figured this would be adequate for people to do that with. We quickly learned right away that people hated this little can. It was too small, it had no wheels, and it has no lid. So we heard that loud and clear way before we took the survey. That was the thing we heard in the first couple of weeks. So it became clear that this wasn't good enough, and the survey at the end demonstrates that this takes care of that problem at least to a large degree. So that brings me quickly to our conclusion. We've got a graphic here that is meant to sort of demonstrate what our decision needs to be here. We're balancing the convenience of single stream against the benefits I've described here tonight of dual stream. I think we created this graphic to look unbiased as to which way we are leaning. I think if I made it today, I'd probably have the benefits side of the scale dip a little lower than and weigh a little heavier than the convenience side. But that is really the question before us tonight, and I'm hoping that members of the public might weigh in on that issue. And as I say, I think that the benefits do outweigh the loss of convenience, and I hope that we've come up with a solution to address what we regard as the major criticisms of the dual stream collection method that we are proposing. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we are not taking action on this tonight. We're not voting on anything. This is not a proposal. This is an informational presentation. So we're going to start with questions from the council.
Hi, yes. Hi, thank you, by the way. I want to express my appreciation before I ask you my question, just for sorting through this. You do a great job. Thank you for taking the time. There are a lot of issues here, and it's very important to us that you get it right, and you seem like you're doing a good job, so we appreciate it. My question is one that I've been to many meetings over the last few years or so in buildings or other places where there are more than just a couple of options. Like you can put your refuse in a variety of things, more than double stream. Is that like the next level? We could go to triple stream or quadruple stream or something, or is this sort of the pinnacle? And why is it? I don't know what the conventions are in this venue.
I only know of two streams that people are thinking of here, or two methods, I should say, single stream and dual stream. Splitting out even more, yeah. I do not see that happening. It's already difficult enough to be asking people to make room for another recycle can, and asking people to separate just in the manner that we are suggesting here with dual stream. I certainly.
I'm not encouraging it. I was just curious if that's
and,
what.
And certainly, I don't see that as something that is on the horizon.
Okay, thank you.
If you spend any time on an island like Martha's Vineyard, your separation is clear glass, colorful glass, tin cans,
Yeah, it's like a big array.
steel
right?
cans,
Yes.
aluminum cans, paper, cardboard, all different things, and people adapt and people do it.
In that case, does a truck come along and collect all those?
Oh, no.
No, people bring them down
so
to
there's actually
and that's-
more fuel used in the delivery than
because
you're using.
people then are expected to bring it to a
I'm sorry, it's supposed to be questions
processor.
only, my bad.
Yes, questions?
Yeah, in terms of the various cans, is it on? What will be the eventual color scheme? Like paper, will it be blue? Plastic and bottles, brown?
Yeah,
And then green would be yard waste?
there's completely separate from this whole issue is a new California law that is passed, and they're finishing the rules for it very shortly. It's called SB 1383, and it is it's primarily aimed at making people, I'm not even going to say encouraging people, it is aimed at making people put their food waste into a compost cart. And part of that law is to create a uniform look for garbage carts throughout California. And it started out that the green carts and the compost carts actually stay green. The garbage carts are allowed to be gray or black. The recycling carts, at first they were demanding that they were to be blue, and that has been changed to that the body of the cart can be any color, but the lid has to be blue. And that's the way we're going to order these new carts. It's going to be brown with a blue lid. It will have a photograph on it, because that is also part of this new law. That it's some uniform pictures on the lid saying what can be allowed in that particular cart. So it's going to be brown with a blue lid, and that is to comply to this future law.
And that's true for whether you put paper in it or you put plastics in it.
Well, yeah. I mean, eventually, yeah, I mean, that answer is yes, but the law does not require that we take in all the carts that are out there now and replace them with new ones. It gives you till 2032. So the ones that are out there now will have lived their useful life and will have been slowly but surely churned out for the new color. Since we know this is coming and we're buying a bunch of new carts now, we're going to comply with the law immediately. So just makes sense to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Question? Yeah.
Yes. When do you see this rolling out across the whole town?
We figure that in June, all of our jurisdictions will vote on this. It's leaning in other, I mean, Tiburon and Mill Valley have heard this presentation already, and they have voted in favor of pursuing the dual stream system. So if it is approved, we will order the carts in June. It takes about 6 weeks to get them and deliver them out. And so we expect July, August, sometime in August to begin.
So this is going to be our agenda next month? Is that
Yes, the second meeting in June.
okay? And do you see any evidence that there's a pickup of businesses here in the United States, either in cardboard or the great increase, dealing with the great increase in home deliveries that are happening in cardboard and also paper, or is that just a non-existent business in the West Coast?
If you mean, is Amazon non-existent in the West Coast?
No.
What are we?
Is there an increase in recycling of these paper and cardboard products?
Well, there's definitely, paper is still, the cardboard, definitely. There's a much more cardboard in the paper stream than there used to be. There's less newspaper and more cardboard. So, yeah, and the Amazon effect is definitely felt throughout the industry. There's a lot more cardboard out there now.
Any other questions?
Thanks for the information, and thanks for being receptive to the public comments that you got and the survey results. I'm just wondering, do you want your little brown cans back from the pilot program? Are you taking those back?
We don't want them back, but if people want to give them back, they just need to call us and we'll come and take them away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Oh,
then-
my last question is, did the Beckman household comply? Were they in the 99%?
Great, we were on it every week. I looked it up every week, made sure I was doing it
I'm
right.
not sure where each of you live, so I don't even know if you were in the dual stream.
He was down.
Okay, we're going to open it up for public comment and questions on this. Again, we are not voting or taking any action on this tonight. This is purely informational, so if you have questions or comments, and I'm going to ask you to try to limit your comments to 2 minutes if you had some on this, because we have a huge agenda tonight. Thank you so much.
I would prefer mauve. Hi, Karen Gerbosi, 111 Parkview Circle. Just a question on you were saying there's going to be writing on the trash cans?
Picture, yeah.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
because I'm like, either you're going to have writing in 4 languages, or you just need to have icons. So,
Actually, the law addresses that. You have to have writing in different languages if the population like San Francisco will have to have lots of writing.
Thank you, by the way, they were really good, appreciate that.
Reaches that threshold.
bigger
always
trash
appreciate
cans,
that.
okay. And then I have what I refer to as a baby blue that's not that size, a small blue, and so I can keep that until its wheels fall off?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's basically my questions thus far.
Thank you. If you're planning on asking questions, if you want to line up behind the microphone, that'd be great too, so we can keep things rolling here.
Jean Greenbaum, Casa Buena Drive. I live in a condominium, so I don't know what kind of new rules there's going to be for a multi-unit places. We already have a lot of bins out there. I don't know if we're going to be able to accommodate it. So we already have, so it's not really dual stream, right? Because you have cardboard, you have compost, and then you have, so it'll be 4. Yeah, 5, right. So I'm just wondering, is there something going to be, and whether you have materials that we can post specific to multifamily homes where we can post it and educate our people, or do we have to create our own?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. Good question, and something that really probably should have addressed is that during the pilot project, we had a very tough time getting multifamily residences, like apartments, the one condo complex that was in the pilot project, and we realized it was very difficult to get them to comply as quickly and easily as a resident that we could send some material to. Same goes for commercial businesses. We do not intend to have them comply with the dual stream right off the bat. We realize it's going to take more time for them, so we will work with them on an individual basis to eventually wean them off of single stream. But we will create all of the educational materials and supply the apartments with those materials when we, as we approach them one at a time. And we realize that's going to be tough, and we've already prepared some routes that will take those places, the commercial businesses and the apartments, and put them on a route that we expect to not really comply for a while until we can slowly but surely work them into it. So,
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Next.
Hi, Louise Brown, 9 Summit Drive. I will be an enthusiastic participant in this, so I just want to say that up front. I think this is really important for us to do, but I just wanted the town to consider the possibility of thinking about how we manage the increased volume of carts that will be in some places where there are already a lot of narrow streets and other hazards that make it difficult to navigate. I live in a place that we call sort of mockingly trash can corner. We have neighbors who leave their cans out all week and they have the ability to put them away, either behind fences or in garages, and they don't. So they're left encroaching on parking spaces and the street, and I don't think that we're probably in a unique position in that way, and I'd like the town to consider, if this is approved, either putting in place some regulations, restrictions, guidance around can storage for those people who have an ability to get it off-street, on property, and hidden away, because I think it's a bit of a blight, quite honestly, all of these cans, and it's not going to get any prettier, although recycling will be more intuitive because we'll know which can to put it in. So please just consider the volume and what that's going to do to some parts of the town. The other thing is picking up a little bit on what Mr. Kuhnhart said about all of the cardboard. There is an enormous amount of cardboard that's coming to our homes because there's easy delivery of everything these days, and I wanted to suggest the possibility of consideration of a central location where things like cardboard specifically could be dropped, so that people who are having trouble storing all of that, particularly if it's every 2 weeks that they're getting pickup, could have an easy place to drop. We have central collection places for used clothes and shoes, like at Colonial Liquors. I don't think that that's contributing to beautification, but there might be some places where people could drop off their recyclables if they're having trouble with the 2-week storage week over week. Thank you.
Thank you. Got that, Mr. Town Manager? Okay.
Azad Benam, Meadow Ridge Drive. I was wondering if we can have them in different sizes, because we don't really have a lot of room to store these. We already have 3 cans, and we are on a slope, so there is a limited space. So if we don't need such a big 65?
Yeah, it's about
Yeah.
60.
I was just wondering if we can do it so we can just put them next to each other and don't occupy more room.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, do you want to address that, or?
Yeah, we can, we could, certainly there are the half the size of this is a 32-gallon. To be honest, we don't have the staff. We're going to be talking about roughly 12,000 residents, and we don't really have the staff or the ability to take what could be a few thousand phone calls for different sizes of cans. So our plan really is to deliver these out to everyone. We realize that not everyone will want this size, and we will probably end up getting many of those phone calls anyway. And we can accommodate people who call us up and say, I really can't use this big can. Would you come take it away, and can you get me a smaller one? Yes, we have smaller ones. Yes, we can do that. But to roll this plan out in the beginning, we really kind of want to just roll it out and let people figure out whether or not they really need to call and ask for a different size can, because ultimately, even though it's a smaller can, it doesn't take up much less space. It's a little, certainly it's a little, it's a little narrower, and it's a little less square than this big one, but ultimately it's not that different of a footprint, and we're hoping that most people will just accept the bigger one, but we can accommodate a smaller size, and we'll take those calls as we have to.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, we do. Okay. If there's anybody else that wants to speak, if you can get up behind the microphone, that'd be great. Line up. That'd be fantastic.
Hi, Phyllis Galanis, 215 Prince Royal Drive. We still have the blue can. And so when you deliver the brown, and it's going to have a blue lid, what do you want us to put in what? Are you going to have those instructions for us? Because glass and plastic and...
Go ahead, Jim. Take the microphone.
We don't really care what kind of can you put out as long as the right stuff is in it. So it's not going to matter. However, the can that we are going to deliver is going to be a paper-only can. It'll have a sticker on it that says paper, just to get people started on the right foot with that can. So, yes, it'll paper and cardboard, and there'll be a. Correct, yeah, so it's cardboard and paper in the one and everything else in the other. Yep.
Lucinda Smith, Altoay. I went to a recycle compost session on Saturday, which I thought was excellent, and I think we need to have a lot more of that. I think the biggest issue is going to be education and getting people to understand what goes in what bin. I have to say that there was so much information delivered that a lot of people were more confused when they left than when they arrived. So it needs to be laid out in pretty straightforward form. Pictures is great, but I think that we need to have a slow implementation with a lot of education and a lot of exposure so people don't feel dumb and they really want to participate.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then I think we are done then with this presentation. Mr. Ivaroni, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all your comments and your questions. And it sounds like this is actually coming to the council in a month or so. So we can talk more about it then, too. So moving on to the consent calendar. The purpose of the consent calendar is to group items together which are routine or been discussed previously. Do not require further discussion. They're approved by a single motion. Any member of the council, staff, or public may request removal of an item, and rescheduling of the item will be at the discretion of the mayor and the town council. Is there anybody who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Yes, sir, Mr. Kuhnhart.
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, item 4B, if we could pull it for a brief discussion and explanation.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then let's deal with 4B first. Council, does that make sense?
Sure.
Yes?
Or we could just approve the others, whatever you like.
Or council with an E, yes.
I was talking to Teresa, sorry.
It's the mayor's pleasure.
Oh, wow. Jeez. Let's go right for 4B. Mr. Kuhnhart, you pulled 4B.
To explain, first of all, I have no question with the first half, which is Ordinance 986 up for its second reading, which has to do with reducing public smoking of all kinds. No problem, no question, no foul. With 987, I have done a great deal of thinking about this issue, as was evidenced in our last meeting about this, and have concluded that I should vote no on 987, and I didn't want to just do so without any opportunity to explain, particularly because you, Mr. Mayor, have done so much work on making sure that we take care of our youth, that you have done extraordinarily, I think, heroic work on the issues of smoking and vaping, and also on this issue. And I'm not here to create a great disagreement, nor am I here to try to persuade any of the other members of the council who, when we last voted on this, all were unanimously voted in support of the proposed ordinance. Really, my entire intent, and I have written up all of my thoughts, which I've shared with you. I wish I could have shared these with you prior to now, but the Brown Act prohibits us from doing that. This is only a public process, and if anybody wants my 2 pages of comments, I'd be happy to make them available to you in the public. But the fundamental thing is that we had a lot of good conversation on both sides, pro and con, saying, A, there's a lot of illicit and licit use. There's a lot of uncertainty about what is being used in the way of cannabis products. There is fear about how to control those things. And I wanted to kind of put a memory and a marker into the record that maybe 2-3 years from now, when this issue has advanced nationally, perhaps when if our federal government does the right thing and removes cannabis from the Schedule I Schedule I narcotics where it doesn't belong. And when banking becomes even more prevalent, I think banking is more prevalent than we got advice on actually here in the council chambers, but it's not uniform. And certainly it is not completely clear how we could do a controlled and properly supervised adults-only business, although from observing my daughter's community in Oregon, where she's been living for several years, there is absolute control on age use of the stores that do sell cannabis products. You have to submit your driver's license at the door before the lock is unlocked, for example. And so I just think that the landscape will change. I think that a legalized business could enhance understanding, transparency, better quality control, better research, and I think that's coming. Just to back up and say, I'm not here to say I want to persuade anybody else to vote differently from the way they did last time. I don't expect that. I don't think that I have any monopoly on righteousness on this issue. And I'm going to be voting no, and I wanted to be able to have this opportunity to explain that, and thank you very much for that opportunity.
Are there any questions from the council?
I have one for Teresa.
Yes, please.
Can we include this in the minutes for tonight's meeting?
The comments of the council member?
Yes.
Yes,
In full.
and I believe that that one of the staff members is going to make some copies so that members of the public have those comments as well.
Are there any other questions from council on this item? Okay, then I need to open up to the public, right, for public comment?
Yes, you'll be doing public comment at this point on
Okay.
item 4B only.
Is there any public comment on item 4B at this point? Okay, then hearing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council for discussion and a possible motion.
I'll make, unless you guys want to discuss it, thank you, David, for your comments. I'll make two motions. The first one will be that I'll move that we approve items 4A through 4F except for 4B, and then I'll make a separate motion about that one.
Second.
Just a moment, we have not taken public comment on
I thought you did.
the unpulled part of the consent calendar. So the item in front of you right now is only 4B. We can then go right to the rest of the consent calendar. The mayor has decided to take 4B first.
Okay.
So
Have you
4B.
called for public comment on 4B?
We just did
I will
that.
make a motion that we approve item 4B.
Second.
Okay, I will move that we approve
486 and 47.
ordinance 986.
Second.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Andrews?
Yes.
Mayor Ravazio?
Yes.
I will move that we approve ordinance number 987.
Second.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
No.
Vice Mayor Andrews?
Yes.
Mayor Ravazio?
Yes. Okay, so now we're on 4A and 4C through 4F. Is there a possible motion?
Do you have to ask for public comment?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any public comment? Even though it's a consent calendar?
Yes, the public has a right to make
Okay.
public comment if they choose.
Any comment? No? Okay, hearing none. Then we're back to the council for
If there's no
of a
discussion,
possible motion.
I will make a motion that we approve items 4A through 4F except for 4B.
Second.
Councilmember Bailey?
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Andrews?
Yes.
Mayor Ravazio?
Yes. Okay. Item 5, public hearings. There are none. Let's get into our long list of business items for this evening. 6A, annual report from the Sales Tax Citizens Oversight Committee. Staff report.
All yours.
Karen, are you?
I am committee chair for the Sales Tax Citizens Oversight Committee. And so you have before you in the packet, you have a staff report, and you have 2 pages of our annual report. I'm assuming that you've read these conscientiously, and that I don't need to read them to you. And all that there is before you is whether or not you want to approve the report as presented, which is basically that you accept the report, or if you have any action you wish to take. And I'm here to receive any comments or anything that you wish to give to me to take back to the committee. The committee is next meeting on the 3rd, which is, I think, is a week from today. Our committee.
Yeah.
The 4th, excuse me. One else of our committee is here, Jean, so it takes two of us to get the date right. So anyway, so that's all that I really have to say about it this evening, and I'm here in case there's anything that you wish for me to convey to the committee.
Okay. Are there any questions for Karen? Yes.
Please. Thank you very much for continuing to volunteer in this way. It's really great for the town, and it's very indicative of you as well as our town. The informal reserve of $2.5 million, if you could just, who is the source of that informal reserve? Was that the prior council? Was that the town manager? And what is informal about it or formal about it?
Well, I think it's not set in stone, so it's not like there's some protocol that says this is the amount of reserve that you shall have. So there's not a must or a shall about it. And I think that I think the guidance for it primarily came from the town manager, and now I'm going to let him respond to your query.
Thank you. Councilmember Kuhnhart, members of the council. So it's true, the informal reserve was set by staff, and it's informal because it was set by staff. It hasn't formally been adopted by the council. Something that has bought us some time on that decision has been we've luckily had money in the bank that we're not prepared to spend yet. We did take that analysis to the Finance Committee that's headed by our Vice Mayor, and really focused on what would happen if we had a natural disaster, an earthquake, major flood, whatever, and how long would we have to operate before we'd have funds available to us. And so we focused on that, and with our current operating budget, we landed on the $2.5 million recommendation. Still, it's set aside, it's informal. We plan on taking that recommendation to the council probably one of the next 2 meetings for your review, and then formalize it by resolution, similar to what we did with our operating reserve of 10% of our operating budget, which is about $2 million right now. Okay. So we're going to bring that to you in the next couple meetings. So.
We'll follow up. This is a fiscal year 17-18 report. What's been the trend since then? Do you have a sense of what the trend is? Are we still taking in a great deal more than we're expending, $2.5 million versus $970?
At this time, yes. Part of what's occurred is that with the initiative that was passed is that the town now has confidence about the availability of funds going forward, so that there was some, not exactly reluctance, but discretion about not spending funds because going forward we weren't confident about the income stream. So now, having passed the last measure that we passed, we have more confidence in the revenue stream, and so the amount of funds that we will have spent from the income that comes in from this will certainly ramp up.
Okay.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I don't know whether I can get into an opinion.
No, I meant
to
Todd.
Doing questions,
Yes.
but I do think we're spending that money in the second half of the meeting, so.
Some of it, yeah.
Any other questions?
The rest I'm taking.
You like
No questions, thank you.
Questions? Yes.
I'd just like to thank her for serving on the committee.
Oh.
But,
We can do that in comment.
Okay.
Then let's open this up for public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on this or talk about this? And if you could try to limit your time to 3 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
20% of our committee here.
Because I have to take issue with Jean Greenbaum. I'm on the committee, and so I don't think we had any hesitancy about spending this. I think there's been I think it's been described as like a logjam that, and so there hasn't been, in my opinion, any huge increase from this report to this year that we're going to be reporting, I guess, next year, in the amount of projects that are actually completed. Projects, I mean, there's been a lot of consulting work done. In fact, most of the money is being spent on consulting. So that is something that we've raised before. That I think it's being addressed with staff increases and other things. I think we've been heard. But in answer to your question, this year isn't, in my opinion, any different than last year that we're going to be reporting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was more about going forward, that the curve is going to go up on how much.
Well, I think we asked about this year because, we're kind of delayed in the reporting, so,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, hearing none, I will bring it back to the council for discussion. Yes, sir. Mr. Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Sorry,
We have, in the 1 year, almost $2.5 million of revenue and less than $1 million of expenditures. Overall, we have a balance of $7.5 million, 2.5 of which is the informal reserve. That's great. So there's essentially $5 million of unexpended. And there's, in my other council representation, such as in the Safe Routes to School Committee, there are some projects that are yet to be done. So I just wanted to reflect on the big picture scale. This is all, the big picture scale of this. I don't think it's bad. It would be much worse if we were taking in less than $1 million and we had $7.5 million somehow underwater. We're in very good shape, but we also should, if we're collecting this tax money, we should be doing useful things with it.
I think Peter's going to do that in the second half. I am
probably
pretty sure he's dying to do that, so I think we're going to take care of that.
Great.
Any other discussion? And
The only thing I'd ask, Mr. Mayor, is, and Karen, I don't know if you have it available to you, but I'd ask that we include in the minutes or in our approval or something, the names of the other 5 members of the, how many people are on the committee?
There are 5 members.
So I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, but you consistently do diligent and excellent work that we're all grateful for, and please keep on keeping on, and I think we should recognize, I don't know all their names. I know you two, obviously, but I don't remember everybody's names. If I did, I would simply recite it now for the record.
Stephen Flahive.
Steve.
John Howard.
John.
Carl Spursum.
And Carl Spursum.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Jean and I are the other.
Yes.
The proper gender component.
I don't think, Karen, you're not asking for an action item. We just receive it, right?
You're going to,
No.
you acknowledge that
we don't actually have to vote on this.
It's now yours.
We just received the report, right?
Okay.
Which we have done.
Thank you, that's it, that's all I got.
And committee.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on then to item B, review and discussion of the Corte Madera Dog Park site analysis. And the council is to provide direction on this as well. We are not voting on this, it is providing direction. Mario, you up on this?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to start it off and then turn it over to our director of Parks and Rec. Again, back in 2016, Mario and the Park and Rec Commission started evaluating potential locations for a dog park. We hired a service, MIG, to help us with that evaluation. And again, that started in 2016. If you go to the discussion on page 2, they really landed on 7 decision points as they looked at various sites within our community. And they landed on 3 potential sites: the Pixley Avenue median, Town Park on the southern edge adjacent to the rear of Park Madera Center, and the Porter Cooley site, which is out from Warnham, I believe. And so there's analysis, there's attachments to the pros and cons. There's also a survey within there that hopefully that helps you in some of the review and analysis. Since that time, and at a couple council meetings ago, the mayor and the council brought up this issue of the dog park, and I take ownership. Back in 2017, I asked this analysis to cease as we focused on other items within Parks and Rec, within the budget and other programming. I also was less than impressed of up to a $500,000 cost estimate for a dog park. And so that's on me and no one else. But after the clear direction I received from the mayor and the council, I met with the Park and Rec director and also the chair and vice chair of the commission and discussed, where we're at, and we wanted them to provide a recommendation for us. Mario can speak to that meeting. There's minutes from that meeting as well. But they've identified 3, additional sites since that time. And again, it's the San Clemente Drive area across from CHP. That's the California Highway Patrol Station. Montesino Avenue, that's on the railroad dirt area. And again, Pixley Park, potentially partnering with Larkspur there. So the commission met, I believe, last month, and where they landed as a potential recommendation, and I'll let Mario speak to that, but they landed on the Portaculu site and really directed staff to analyze that as a potential site. I'll tell you that's a basic analysis has occurred from our Public Works Director. There's a lot of negatives to that site that would be potentially difficult for us, and Peter can certainly speak to that. But if we get anything from tonight, it would be helpful for staff to have clear direction from the council on 1, maybe 2 sites of preference to this council, and we'll go back and do the work with the commission and come back to you later this summer and have a public discussion about the park. I believe, in talking to staff, that we could do a very nice dog park in the $50,000 range, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, and we build upon that. But again, I think at this point, we do need direction from the council of how you would like us to proceed in narrowing the scope of our time spent, of how we analyze that. I would argue that we've really spent a lot of time to this point, and we really need to narrow this down. And with that, Mario, if you want to add anything from that discussion from your meeting, would be helpful.
Thank you. I do want to emphasize a few things, and I appreciate the council's opportunity to hear it. The commission was really appreciated the opportunity for direction from the council, and they really appreciated the support for the project. They're all the commission as a whole is unanimously in support of a dog park in Corte Madera. The ramifications of different sites is something that that weighs heavily on them, and to a point that they're certainly happy to explore all the different options that we can receive direction on. The Portaculu site being the one that they liked the most, being a central location, being on the pathway, being close to Town Park, walking distance, spreading out the facilities of the town itself and its park facilities, not impacting Town Park itself as much, were certainly all attractive attributes to that site. In terms of the technical and engineering aspect of it, I can't speak to that, but in terms of trying to accomplish the spirit of a community dog park for Corte Madera, it hit on a lot of points. So that's something that the commission was looking for direction in terms of trying to do some outreach at some point when we heard from the council, and they're ready and eager to hear from the public on 1 or 2 sites to continue that conversation and come back to the commission, to the council with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Questions from the council? Jim, I think you're ready to.
This wouldn't be necessarily directed towards you, Mario, but probably should go to Peter or Adam. If we put in a dog park, what sort of CEQA stuff are we going to have to jump through?
Where are you going? CEQA.
Yeah.
That's how you clear a room.
Yeah, right. No, I'm just thinking.
One person runs. That's, clearly there would have to be some CEQA analysis, and I think it's really, at this point, impossible to tell exactly what that would entail, but we would actually have to analyze the potential impacts of that use on that site. That's really all I can tell you at this point without getting a clear project description, all the details of exactly specific location, and sort of the parameters under which that dog park would actually operate, it's hard to give you an answer to that at this time.
Yeah, I'm thinking, depending on where we put it, the CEQA will cost more than the fencing.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Any other questions from the council?
Could you please give the exact address of the Porter Cooley site and where one would park to deliver their dog?
Yeah. I don't know if we have a graphic of it. Yeah, that's on part of the packet. The Porter Cooley site is adjacent to the Corte Madera Larkspur Path at the end of Warnham Drive.
Sandra Marker.
The Sandra Marker Trail. Right across from Andy's Market on either side of the pathway. There's two linear.
Okay. That is the site that our town council has designated as the only site for future affordable housing.
Yeah, that is the way it's identified in the general plan.
Got it.
Yes.
And there would be parking only on the private property where the gyms and the other, the offices are.
And there's also public parking available off of Nellen and Warnham, as well as it being
On the
less than a
street.
10-minute walk from Town Park.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? I'm going to ask, is it Public Works, you said, about what the negatives are of the Porter Cooley site? And it looks
Yeah.
like Peter's all teed up and ready to go, so.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. The only, I wasn't involved in the process, but, the aerial that you're looking at now, the lower end of Sandra Marker Trail, it is heavily used. It's our most active biking and walking path by far. And so you have an issue of where you're fencing in the area. Councilmember Kuhnhart brought up the parking. It is walkable for sure, as your director of Park and Rec said. But from a automobile trip generation rate, dogs parks actually have a really high automobile trip generation rate. A lot of people drive their dogs to the park and like being able to let their dog off into an off-leash area. And so, from that standpoint, there isn't any viable parking that I know of at this site adjacent to it. There is street parking, as was mentioned, that you could park in private lots. You could park at the DMV if you want to walk across the street. However, the other two sites don't have that issue, right? So Town Park has parking right in front of it. That is a mostly unused area at what they're calling the Pixley Median. And then if you want to put your economic development hats on and you think of the site behind Park Madera Center, there's a pet store there, there's restaurants there, there's places to get your hair cut. A lot of people will trip chain and trip link if they park at Park Center. Maybe they'll get some gas, maybe they'll buy some pet toys. And that right is in the backside.
And don't we own Park Madera Center?
We do.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, hope that answers your question.
Those are our tenants. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Are there specific negatives that you can identify with the Pixley Avenue site or the Town Park corner?
Sure. So when the subject of the dog park did come up, and the commission was taking public comment during that process, we did have a handful of neighbors that expressed their concerns about a dog park on the Pixley Median. And then the other, in terms of the other site on the southeast corner of Town Park, behind Pet Club, the concern was expressed in terms of impact on the park in general, as was the Pixley site as well. But
Are we worried too many people are going to come?
It would the concern from the commission was an already very active park to begin with would receive added stress. It wasn't. It was certainly just something that was expressed as a concern.
Can you call up a visual of that portion of Town Park?
And since we're talking about that, is that, I've walked these places, and section of Town Park doesn't seem to be really utilized at all, from what I can see.
It's certainly passive park space.
Yeah. There's the
Yes, right
occasional
there.
picnics.
So
There's
basically,
some
you're talking
picnics.
about that wedge.
That sort of triangle green space that right above the Tamalpais dog grooming.
It's
title.
like a hill, right?
It's on a slope, yes.
Yeah. And it's not, there's no picnic tables. I mean, it's not really.
There are some, but
Yeah,
they're
kind of
They're
like
across the
on
pathway.
west side.
They're on the north side of the path.
But it seems like it's an underutilized area of the park, doesn't it? Am I? alone?
Which area?
The wedge.
I agree with you, Bob.
The
I
edge.
agree.
where?
Right there, yes.
Any other questions?
If we were to put a dog park there, what all would it involve?
That's part of what we're looking for direction from the councils in terms of scope of a dog park, as simple as a fence line. And that goes in terms of the scope of the type of dog park it would be, whether how many amenities there would be. Very simply, a fence and access to water would be as basic as we would look at.
Right. And could we look at the one over on San Clemente?
Right on it. I didn't know that we were going to discuss it.
Okay, wait, can I say something? We're trading into an area where if we were to talk about that specific location, I couldn't participate. I'm like, what? Because that's reasonably close to my house. So I should probably not participate in this discussion, right?
Well, then I got to leave too.
Like, I could see it on the map there, so.
Go over to San Clemente.
We're asking questions, though, so
You can
we're allowed to.
Okay, zero in. Yeah.
Listen to the questions, because we don't have a.
I don't mind going to the back room, I just,
I'm sorry, a little further up. I apologize, Rebecca. A
the
little
back of my house backs onto
Yeah,
Town Park.
There you go, the gray area.
It's the gray area and then the green,
A little
I
further
guess.
back.
There you go.
That's wet. That's right. That's wet.
That's over on San Clemente.
Should I go in the back?
How much would it cost?
not the pond.
So here's our pump station. Apologize. So here's our pump station, and we're looking at this. We're talking about this site right here, the gravel area.
What about the area down below where the trees are?
Yeah.
Just fence that whole area.
Pretty close.
These are all certainly possibilities to explore.
We're still doing questions.
I know.
Okay,
I'm just trying to identify the sites.
okay. Are there any other questions from the council? Let's get this back in. Okay, then let's open it up to the public for comment. If you have any comment on this, I ask you to limit your time to 3 minutes. If there's more than one person, if you don't mind lining up. We have an extensive agenda this evening that I know you're all dying to hear all the budget stuff. So
You know,
I want to
Mr.
make
Mayor,
sure we
before
allow
we go,
plenty of time for that.
Mr. Mayor, you know, before we, I'm sorry? Yeah, in an abundance of caution, I'm just going to recuse myself as we
You're
continue.
gonna recuse yourself
I will
already?
go in the back and eat cookies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Allison. I live on Baltimore Avenue, and I'm a Parks and Rec Commissioner. So just to give you a little bit more of our thoughts on this, and this has been a lengthy process. The town park site, the one that is seen as unused park space, it is used for some of the kindergarten soccer games. But another part of our thinking is that there is a line of houses right along there. So we anticipated that it would be a big impact on the houses that back up onto the park right there. Same with Pixley Avenue. The neighbors from across the street came and made it very clear that they really did not want a dog park there. And that part of the park is so heavily impacted already that we thought it would make the least sense to put something additional into the most heavily impacted part of the park. We looked at the Porter Cooley site as the only kind of unused piece of land that the town had available, aside from this site here, which offers really no parking options at all. So that's kind of how we narrowed in on the Porter Cooley site, if that gives you any more insight into our thinking.
Thank you.
May I ask? Just a quick question of her.
Yes, I guess. Councilman
First of all, thank you for your service. Is the primary objection noise?
For most people, for the neighbors from Pixley, it was noise. It was noise and added people coming to the site. And that's what we anticipated from the other site in the park.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, Phyllis Galanis. I'm glad she mentioned that on the San Clemente area, there's absolutely no parking. So, and I know that dog owners would like to drive their, pet to the park, whatever. On the Porter Cooley, remember that there is water there. So I don't know what you're considering on fencing. There's an office building complex that has asked, we had signs up there, that's where my office was for a long time, saying tenant parking only. Over at where Andy's Market is, there's really no parking there. There's no parking along Tamil Vista Boulevard. So where are you expecting people to park? And with a dog park next to a slough that generally has water in it, that doesn't sound really desirable either. So, so far, I don't see that we really have an area right now. Also on the San Clemente, that is all gravel. Of course, you'd have to put sod in there because people don't want to run their dogs. Of course, they'd be running around in circles because that's a very small piece of land. But nevertheless, they wouldn't want them running on gravel.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, if you don't mind, again, lining up, we're going to spend all that money David was worried about later on in the meeting, so.
Oh, Lucinda Smith. I would support going in partnership with the dog park over in Pixley Park. I am a little frustrated because I did not participate or even know there were discussions on the one here in Corte Madera, so I don't have a lot of information or feeling about it. So far, for what I've tried to catch up with tonight, it looks like their areas are way too small. The one over on Pixley, not Pixley, Piper Park, excuse me. Piper Park is over there to, adjacent to the new police station and the children's park over there. It's a nice area. It's got some topography up and down, flat area. It's already grassed. It's already got water. And it would just take a little bit more to improve it. I think it would be far less cost-wise, and we could share that with Larkspur. The ones that I'm seeing proposed here tonight are absolutely unworkable. I agree with exactly what Phyllis was saying. You've got to have a place for people to park their car, and it's generally one person and one dog. People who are objecting from a sound standpoint about the dogs, if we limit it so that you can't take your whole horde of dog walking associates, they can bring 10 dogs into it. I've seen them do it over there in Piper Park, and that's got to be verboten because they're putting an undue load on our facilities that are very limited as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, then we will bring it back to the council for discussion, and we are not voting on this, we are providing direction, correct? Correct, okay. Is there anybody? Yes, Jim.
Well, when I was talking about the San Clemente site, I was thinking of parking on the gravel and then the strip down with the trees, enclosing that in a fence. So if we did something over there, that was my concept.
Okay.
Some expense in creating the parking.
And I thought it could be done relatively inexpensively and hopefully relatively quickly.
That's like not many cars.
What?
You can sort of kind of count the cars by just transposing across the street.
Right, so.
Okay. Further comments? Eli, looks like you're...
Yeah, thank you. So I think that parking is definitely very important to provide for our dog park. So that is one of the reasons why I would not support the Porter Cooley site. There's really no parking accessible there. So I think I'm leaning strongly towards the Pixley median. And what I love about that site is that it's already enclosed by nature of it being a median. I like the plan that was proposed in the, I think this was by our consultant, years ago, in 2016. It seems like a good fit for the program. It's self-contained, like I said. There's parking. My only concern would be that the neighbors in that area who are already being bothered by the post office, I don't want them to feel like we're adding insult to injury. But I also kind of question how much noise a dog park actually generates. I've been to several dog parks, and it hasn't been that noisy an affair in my personal experience. And also, the park would obviously be closed during sleeping hours. So let me know if you guys disagree on that. But I think that that's a good site. I'm also open to the Park Madera Center site. I love the idea that it could potentially boost foot traffic through Park Madera Center, which I think is great for the tenants there. It's great it could potentially raise the value of that property as a commercial property, and it's the residents of Corte Madera that own it, so they're the ones that win if the property value there goes up. I think that's definitely an added benefit. There is parking. So I would say I'm sort of leaning strongly Pixley, but also open to Park Madera.
Okay. David,
I completely agree. I think that Eli just said it very well.
I sort of agree. I'm not as big a fan of Pixley because I know this has had a history and that there has been a lot of neighbor issues. They're very concerned about Pixley because that parking lot is heavily impacted already.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the other site in Town Park is an excellent site for the reasons you just cited. I mean, you can practically walk from there to the pet club in about 10 seconds. So it's
You
only
used to
gonna
be
help.
able to when there was a gate there.
Yeah. And there is parking. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You want parking at a dog park, and to put it at Porter Cooley, I think you would just make it and put it in a place where it's just not going to be used. And I think the objective here is to create something that is going to get used a lot. And there is already a parking lot there, so it solves a lot of issues. I don't think it's currently a heavily utilized area of the park. I think it's something, and we could do this quickly because we already own the property. We don't have to do a lot of stuff, right? I mean, we can move on this fast, and I don't think it would take a lot of improvements. So I would strongly encourage us to pursue that site behind Park Madera Center and try to turn that into a town park. That would be my feelings on this, so.
Could we ask staff to prepare a comparative analysis of those two sites?
We can do that. Does that make sense, Todd? Would you like to do that?
Certainly, we certainly be happy
Close
to
public
bring
comment, sorry.
to bring more comments from the commission as well on those two sites specifically. But we have that analysis as well.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we have that analysis, and we'll further prepare that with more input from the commission at their next meeting, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I was just like that, and well, I mean, you've heard our direction, so I think you know where we are.
Can I make one
Yes,
request?
please.
Can that analysis please include information like data on noise generated by dog parks? I know it's out there. I know that this has been measured and studied before, and I would love if we could, rather than just kind of trying to go off our own personal experiences and trying to recall, the last time we were at a dog park, how loud was it? If we could actually see some data, that would be really helpful.
And I would also ask to see data on what the neighbor comments were on Pixley, because I also don't want to buy into a built-in neighbor, issue.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I know that this has been talked about a lot, and I know that they have had a lot of discussion about this, and there's been a lot of comments at Park and Rec meetings about this, having that at that site, and they're very concerned about it.
I believe it, yeah.
So, and I just think we're potentially just buying, we might be
Sure,
solving
no, I
one
see what
issue
you're
by buying
saying.
another
Yeah.
issue, whereas the other one, we can just do it, and we can make this happen, and we've been messing around with this for about 4 or 5 years now, and I would like to just make this happen.
And as I recall, in addition to the noise about the Pixley, it was the parking, the fact that so many people are using that parking lot, because it's, Todd won't like this, it's the annex to the post office parking. So they're there, you know.
Right, I understand.
It's just, you know, everybody says, oh, there's a lot, there's parking. Well, yeah, but they're full of vehicles most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's
And
also the soccer fields and the tennis courts and, you know, the kids' park and the picnic tables.
Right,
All right off
but,
that
you
lot.
know, so.
We will do that. We
You
have
have
clear
direction?
direction. It's helpful, but I will tell you, be prepared that when we do come back, the Pixley site, I will tell you, because I know that neighborhood very well. They're our neighbors, and I spent a lot of time with them, and they are shell-shocked at this point when it comes to noise. They live adjacent to a park. They understand that. But we put a lot of amenities into our park that have affected them. And, you know, the skateboard park is one. You have a playground right there. They understand, again, that they live there. Yeah, a fire station. They have town hall. They have the post office. I think it always has to be balanced. And I'll tell you that we will vet it. But my recommendation is don't impact that neighborhood if we don't have to. But I just wanted to say that. But we understand. We have clear direction, and we'll come back to you with a
And if we
full
can,
analysis.
if we can keep it moving. So this has been going on for a while, and the thing with the town park site, we can do that fast, right? I mean, this shouldn't take too long. Okay, thank you.
If not, I'll play Mario.
Okay, great. Mario, you heard that, you're under fire. Okay, it's time for the big event, the review of the proposed operating budget for fiscal years 2019, 20, and 2021. And we are providing direction this evening. We are not actually voting on the budget, correct, Todd?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and I also just want to emphasize to the council, this is the first of 3 meetings. So we understand that this is a lot of information being thrown at you, the budget and all the agenda items following this budget, the CIP. So staff, our intent is just to have a workshop type of conversation with you this meeting, next meeting, and then have a public hearing for a 3rd meeting, the 2nd meeting in June. Okay, so please approach it like it's a workshop meeting. If you have any questions, we have some new council members, please ask them. And staff, again, between this meeting and the next meeting, we're available to answer any questions. The Finance Committee and Sales Tax Oversight Committee will be meeting in between these 2 meetings to provide further feedback to us, and we'll share that with you at our upcoming meeting. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Daria. She provided a great staff report. She's going to hit the highlights of some of the changes that you should be aware of, and then we're available to answer any questions for you.
Okay, thank you. And again, we are not taking action this evening on the budget, but we are reviewing it. Thank you. Daria.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. As the town manager explained, we have a proposed budget before you for the next 2 fiscal years. This item here is the operating budget, and which includes the general fund and the other funds, which are not part of the capital budget. As you'll see on the first page of the attachment to the staff report, which, if I can just get out here for a minute.
That's it, right there,
Yeah,
right?
yes, that page right there. You can see that there's an operating surplus estimated in the current fiscal year as well as in the 2 next fiscal years based on this proposed budget. That means that the revenues are exceeding the expenditures and that the surplus is being added to the balance, and that the ending fund balance is increasing in each of these 3 years. That ending balance there, that's shown at the bottom, that's essentially, in the absence of the council designating it for something else, that's the reserve. That's the general fund reserve. There's a 10% reserve that was set by the council. That reserve there represents about, in the 1920 year, about nearly 26%, and in the following year, about 25%. That does not include that informal sales tax reserve that was discussed earlier. That's part of the capital fund. And it also doesn't take into account Corte Madera Center Fund, which I'll touch on in a few minutes, which is has a deficit balance. But when you include the Park Madera Center balance, there's still more than a 16% reserve in the next couple of years. So that does exceed the 10% reserve that was set by the council. As you can see by this shows the revenues at the top. Property taxes and sales tax, which is included in other tax, and then further, a little later in the packet, it's broken out, each of those type of taxes. But property tax and sales tax are the two largest components of the revenue in this fund, each comprising about 1/3 of the total. Property tax is estimated to increase 4% next year, which is based on the best information available from the county. And sales tax is actually scheduled to decrease by about over $400,000. And that's because in the current year, we're estimated to receive about $1 million more than we did in the previous year. There was like a one-time infusion of cash due to the fact that a couple of things. The state had enacted or implemented some new software, and they were behind. And so some of the money that was actually for the previous fiscal year was not sent to us until the current fiscal year, well into the current fiscal year. And then also there's a merchant in town that was fulfilling back orders, a long list of back orders, which resulted in, as I say, this one-time sales tax bump up. But even so, sales tax is still increasing if you discount that, those sort of unusual events. So most of the other revenues are stable. There are a few new revenues. There's the Central Marin Fire revenue, which the town will receive for acting as a fiscal officer and also for the performing administrative work. And then there's also about $65,000 in MIRA revenue, which the town will receive for assuming duties related to administration and finance for MIRA. And then the sanitary district will increase its payment to the town by $225,000 due to increased work being done on behalf of the sanitary district. You'll notice that the expenditures, the expenditures on that first sheet are arranged by type, by expenditure type, such as salaries, benefits, that sort of thing. And I've broken out each of the different sorts of retirement because that's an area of interest usually to people. The normal cost is where it says retirement normal cost. That's the cost of the current year retirement portion, and all employees, regardless of the tier of retirement they're in, pay at least 50% of the normal cost. The unfunded liability, that's the amount by which the obligations to retirees and future retirees exceed the assets that CalPERS has for the town. That's mostly based on past losses to their portfolio, and now they're trying to make up for that. And you'll see that it is increasing by over $200,000 in the next fiscal year, that required payment. And that's due to the fact that the discount rate was lowered from 7.5 to 7%. That's the assumed rate of return on their investments. And it's also the fact that they're shortening their amortization period. Then the following year, you'll notice that it does decrease that required payment, and that's because what they call a side payment, the last side payment of the town, is being paid in full. And that side payment, as CalPERS has termed it, has to do with when small employers years ago, less than 100 employees, were required to go into a pool. They calculated what their liability was at that time and just said, that's your liability and you have a certain amount of time to pay it off. And so that's why that's decreasing in that second year, although it will start to increase again. And then the pension trust, that was established by the town
in an attempt to try to mitigate some of the volatility and unpredictability of those increases. It's acting sort of as a second level of reserve. It can only be used for retirement costs. It can't be used to pay for anything else. The town can't decide to use it for anything else. But the payments are adjusted. We've done a 10-year analysis as best we could, and it's been adjusted as we go along in order to achieve a balanced budget at the same time making payments to that trust. So that's, and then the other expenditures are listed there. And then further on in the packet, you'll notice that those same expenditures are listed according to department. And that, let's see what page that begins on. That begins, it's on page 10, where it's the same total, but it's arranged a little differently. So you can see each department, their expenses. And you will probably have noticed that expenditures and transfers out are increasing by nearly $1 million in the next year. A portion of that, I won't go over all of it, that was in the staff report, but more than $300,000 of that has to do with salaries, and that includes some new positions, or some of them aren't new, they just haven't been filled for a while. The superintendent of public works, the assistant superintendent of public works, there's another senior engineer being hired, and those positions will partially be paid for by that increase in the sanitary district revenue. There's also a project manager position, which is a new position, which will be discussed, I think, in the next items on the agenda. And that the intent of that position is that it would be reimbursed by the sales tax fund, as it would be overseeing capital projects. And then there's also an additional associate planner position, which is divided between public works and planning. You may have noticed when you were looking at this that on the first page, the fire department expense that said Central Marin Fire Authority was a different amount than when you look in here at the fire department. That's because on that first page where it said Central Marin Fire Authority payment, that's literally for fire contract services, whereas later on in here, when you see that fire department line item, fire, where it says fire there, that includes also some other outside services, $50,000 for the billing service that the town uses to collect ambulance fees, and then another $7,500 for building maintenance for its fire stations, which it's responsible for. Another part of the increase, which that $1 million increase that I was talking about, in addition to the salaries, the unfunded liability, which I mentioned, is more than $200,000. And then fire was more than nearly $500,000, because fire is now paying for insurance. More than half of that has to do with insurance payments to Bay Cities, the risk pool, which is general liability insurance and workers' comp insurance. In the past, the town paid for that, and the city of Larkspur paid for it. But in the upcoming year, now that Central Marin Fire Authority is effective, they're going to be assuming that. So that caused that fire line item to increase, even though the town is saving money on its own insurance expenses. In addition to, so the end result is on that first page, that the ending balance for 1920 will increase by about nearly $400,000, and then it will increase minimally the following year, just by about $8,500. So there was a 10-year projection that was shared with the Finance Committee, and it did
project a balanced budget in each of the 10 years based on adjusting the pension trust payment. One other thing that I wanted to mention about fire is that by moving fire into the Central Marin Fire Authority, the town's OPEB obligations are expected to decrease. Its long-term OPEB obligations are expected to decrease by about $2 million. Of course, fire, this will be a separate conversation for fire, but right now, I just had a report from the actuary today that estimated the unfunded liability at about $9.3 million, and then moving fire off would move out about $2 million. And so at the end of 10 years, we expect to have $7 million in the OPEB trust, other post-employment benefits. That's what OPEB stands for. So that should, be sufficient for the town's liability for OPEB. And then we are expecting to be able to pay the unfunded liability, although it will be increasing, as well as put money aside in that pension obligation trust. And then the other funds that have the most effect on on the general fund are that Park Madera Center that I was talking about, that fund. That's on page 32 it begins. And there's a deficit in there of $1.9 million, which represents past years of debt service payments and other expenses when those expenses exceeded the revenue that was collected for the rents. Over the past 2 years, there was a little surplus in there, but this year we're projecting there may be a deficit once again due to the fact there were some vacancies in that shopping center, and there was a tenant who has rent that is unpaid back rent, and then there were some improvements that were necessary. But I did receive the budget from the property manager today, and we do expect to once again have a surplus in the next 2 years. And then the insurance fund also, as I said, the expenditure that's on pages 30 and 31. Those expenses for the fire department have been sent over to the fire department, so it's showing a reduction here. And because the claims for the fire department, the actuarial report was affected by the fact that the fire department moved, so we're able to reduce the amount necessary to reserve for claims based on the actuary report. So for next year, a reduced amount will be required to be transferred to the insurance fund. So that's just sort of an overview of the operating fund, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Please.
I'm sorry, could you just go back over the Park Madera Center Fund? Just give me
Yes.
the big picture takeaway from
The
that.
big picture takeaway is that until this year, when there were some vacancies and some unpaid rents and some unexpected expenses due to improvements that were needed, that the center had begun having a surplus, begun reducing the deficit that had accrued over many years. So this year, we think maybe there'll be a little deficit again, which will increase that deficit a little bit, but in the next 2 years, it'll go back to having a slight surplus.
And where on, maybe I'm looking at the wrong sheet, on page 32 or 33, where's that slight deficit?
On 30, let's see, what page, it's right here. It's
About 30,000.
here, we're expecting to take in $35,000 this year.
You wanna take the microphone?
And it's,
Sorry, I can't see it, so you're going to have to read it out to me. You said
okay,
30 grand?
I'll just stay here.
All right.
The expenditures are expected to be $665,000 approximately in this year, and the revenue is expected to be $635,000.
Okay, I see it.
Yes.
Okay, good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? And I just wanted to say that I don't miss George Warman's 300-page green sheet deck, so thank you. This is great.
I
Thank
feel
you.
so lucky to be coming in when I am.
This is amazing. You used a computer on this.
Witchcraft.
Crazy.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sorry, yes, please.
Thank you. Daria, thank you for the excellent report. So the first kind of bigger picture question that I had is just, that I'm new to this. This is my first time going through the budget process. But I was surprised to see that the reserve fund is not an actual fund. It's just kind of the money that's sitting in our bank account. And I understand that $2 million of that, or 10%, is protected by action of the council as a reserve. But I feel like it would be more proper to actually have a reserve fund in the operating budget, and then maybe also turn the sales tax reserve into a capital reserve fund. I feel like if I were just a member of the public and I wanted to see what is the town doing to prepare for economic downturn or disaster, something like that, I would want to see a reserve fund and know exactly clearly how much money is in that reserve fund. So the question is, is there something that I'm missing on why we don't?
No, we can certainly do that. We can do one of two things that I'm thinking of. Maybe there are more things. I can open up a fund and call it reserve fund and transfer, do a transfer into that fund. That it would just be on our books because all of our cash is pooled. We don't have a lot of little bank accounts, but it would be very clear and people could see it. Or on these reports here, on the part that says ending balance, I could say, have a further little section that says components of ending balance and break that down into, whatever the council designates.
Okay, thank you. So that's my first question. My second question, I'm intrigued by the affordable housing fund here that's got a little more than 500 grand in it, and I'm just curious if somebody could kind of tell me under what circumstances or how that might be spent.
Excuse me, council members. Thanks for the question. So currently that fund is strictly limited to use for the construction of affordable housing. Actually, one of the things we're going to be looking at when we do one of the earlier items today was about SB2 funds and inclusionary housing study. One of the things we'll look at as part of that study is whether that's the appropriate sort of restriction on that fund, or whether that fund potentially could be used for other affordable housing purposes. But right now, strictly limited for construction purposes.
So would that be like the town of Corte Madera at some point in the future decides to develop some property, or would that be like a developer comes in and says, oh, we can't afford to put affordable housing, and we say we'll pitch in?
Yes, it could be for either of those two options.
More likely a low-interest loan from us to them.
Okay.
Generally a subsidy for a project that would otherwise not be able to fund construction themselves.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do, and thank you so much for your clarity in both the printing and in your stated. The 0.75% dedicated, I think we call it Prop B, sales tax override is not within your numbers so far.
No,
Correct.
that's right. It'll be in the capital budget.
Okay, and so we'll get into that in a little bit, but and it's kind of stunning that the biggest single item of revenue is other, which includes, as you have pointed out, about 6 different things, and $1 million of that 9+ is the transient occupancy tax, and I just wanted to remind us that that's not an inconsiderable figure, right, that we're dependent upon in the overall picture here. And are you getting cooperation from the state, you believe, and you're getting what you need from the state on all aspects of the sharing of the sales tax at this point?
Yes, they make the payments once a month. I go online. There's a schedule of what day the apportionment is available and what day it's supposed to be deposited. I check that, according to that schedule, and there hasn't been any problem.
And are you confident that, as was mentioned earlier tonight, that profusion of the deliveries to our community from outside national companies, that the sales tax that is assessed by the state of those delivery services to all of us, that we're getting our fair share?
Well,
based on-
we have an independent consultant called HDL, who that's their business. They make sure that the town, in this case, is getting its share, and if it doesn't, then it goes to the state and protests on our behalf. So, and that's how they get paid. They get paid by discovering, mistakes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Then we open it up to the public for comment. If you'd like to make a comment about the budget or have questions, now's the time to do so. Come on up to the podium. Thank you.
Quick queries, how does money get into the Affordable Housing Fund, the $500,000? Where did that come from?
Adam Wolf.
Sure. So there's a variety of ways. There's primarily there are development impact fees that are required for any new commercial development in terms of square footage. There are also, on the other side, as part of our inclusionary ordinance, housing in lieu fees that are paid into that as well. Both sources go into that same.
So it's dynamic, there's funds, it's not $500,000 just sitting there, period. There's things that
funds
are
are adding into it on a continual basis, yeah.
And then the other question I had was completely unrelated to that, is that it seemed like what I heard is that we have a tenant at Park Madera who's in arrears on their rent. Is that what I heard? How does that happen?
They don't pay.
They don't pay.
And what are the consequences, I guess, who's slapping them around?
The town manager addressed that.
Yeah, so it's no longer a tenant, but it's something that the town is in front of, and we will receive our money. So it's not something that we're expecting to have a complete loss. We did have some serious water damage that happened to 2 businesses this past year. We are receiving a majority of that reimbursement through insurance cost, but it also brought to our attention how one of the businesses was running. And so we ended up not renewing that lease, so we lost a couple months' rent. But as we go into this coming year, we project a surplus and making the changes that we had. So there's a combination of things that happened this year. We've handled it. And again, there is some back rent, but that will be paid back to us. We have a plan on that, so.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the budget? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to the council for any other questions or discussion. And if there are none, then we will move on, because we're not taking action on this
I should
tonight.
ask Jim if he's happy, because he's the most knowledgeable among us. Is he happy with?
Well,
Loaded question.
I'm surprised about.
Happy.
Insulting the rest of us, telling you he's the most knowledgeable? I mean,
Well,
On this topic.
I used to tell people that we set up Park Madera so it was running at break even, and I was not pleased to learn that I'm a liar. Okay, hopefully we can get it back to running at break even or slight profit.
Maybe the dog park will help.
In terms of the budget and the reserving, we currently have, by policy, a 10% reserve in the operating budget, and we're still discussing the level to which, and that's sort of, in my mind, that's reserved to handle normal economic fluctuations. Okay.
But that's actually at 5 million, so it's actually at 20% now. 20%.
Right, well, that's the balance in the account, but to me, a reserve means you can't go into it without having to do an extra step, okay, as opposed to unspent balance. And then over in the sales tax override, the $2.5 million there, that's sort of, if there's a disaster, how much would we have to mobilize quickly to handle calling in the gelatis to fix things. I probably shouldn't describe it that way, but in fact, that's what'll happen. Or if sales tax revenue doesn't come in for a few months, how do we meet payroll? Just sort of disaster type expenditures. And so, anyway.
Okay. Then I think we can.
Yeah, I just want to. So I do feel strongly, you guys, that we create formalized operating and capital reserve funds, and I want to know if you guys support that.
Okay. Yeah. Legally, what does it mean?
I would be clear on, well, we already have a formalized reserve fund, and to show it in the budget that's easy, it makes sense, that's not a problem. But when we're talking about the sales tax measure, the sales tax measure isn't necessarily a capital improvement project reserve fund. It's for disasters. And disasters, it's anything that we need it for to make payroll, to move this city along in a disaster for a period of months when we're waiting for the sales tax revenues to come in. And so what we would recommend would be, and I think it's up to $2.5 million would be our recommendation, because that's what we think we would need in our analysis, to put that into a resolution and make it, and spell it out what it's used for. It's for emergencies.
Resilience. It's a resiliency fund.
Sure, and so make sure it's clear and do that by reso and formalize it like we did our operating budget. I think that's what the recommendation would be to the council.
Okay.
And then we could show that in the budget.
Okay, and you're just talking about for the capital budget.
That would be. It's not the capital budget. It's the sales tax measure.
Sure. Okay, but that's in the capital budget report, right? So.
Right. Yeah. That's correct. So I guess it is housed right now in the capital improvement projects budget. So we should think about how we want to show that, because we may want to move that.
Okay, so then in light of that, I would back off from a capital reserve fund, but I
understand.
Having our operating reserve fund being a line item rather than just the cash in the bank seems to me like common sense.
Yeah.
Sure, I think it's how we show it. Okay, no problem.
You're saying take the 5 million and split out
what
2.1?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's we currently have a resolution from years ago saying 10% of that is officially reserved. So.
Jim, I'm not sure I'm following this. Can you dumb it down for me?
Okay, if you look at the total budget, operating budget, it's about $20.1 million.
Okay.
Years ago, before I was on council, they determined that 10% should be the reserve level.
Okay.
So you take the 20.1 and say, okay, 2.2 million, 2.1 million will be our reserve. So if you look at the actual budget, it shows $5 million, subtract out 2.1 million, and what's left over, we can spend on anything.
Got it.
Okay, which we won't, because we're going to be prudent.
Okay, thank you.
Is that right?
Councilmember Andrews asked legally what would be the ramification of doing what he just described, and it really would have no legal impact at all. The resolution that was passed years ago was a policy that the council adopted, and that this council or any future council would be free to change that policy. So what you would be doing is essentially, one way in which you'd be implementing that is just to show as a separate line item. But a future council could decide to change that policy and thus change how it's shown, or take those funds and use them for a completely different purpose. So it really isn't a legally binding step, but it's a way for the council to see really how the policy is being implemented.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item?
I like Eli's suggestion, Councilmember Beckman's suggestion, as identifying a separate line item. That's roughly 2.1, the 10%. As long as we're not saying we need a new investment strategy or a new isolated approvals to go in and out and whatnot, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. Item 6D, review and comment on the possible addition of a field project manager position to be added to the Public Works maintenance staff. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just want to start off, can you put this in the back? And I'm going to turn this over to Peter. So as you heard, it started with the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, the sales tax measure. The positives are we now have a revenue stream where we can start to plan out 10, 20 years because we know what their revenue, we have a good idea what their revenue stream is going to look like. And as we identify these projects, one of the issues that we've had going backwards when I started as the manager and moving forward to today was staffing. And so really going department by department over the last 2 years to really evaluate how we can be more efficient and deliver what the service that we're supposed to deliver. And we've done that over the past 2 years. The last major change you'll see here is in the public works, engineering, and maintenance side, because that's where the rubber really meets the road within this town of our infrastructure. And we've really struggled of how can we deliver these projects and be efficient and cost savings ways. And so is this the only one we have right now? Can you show me? So here is the 1920 budget. So this is currently in the budget. These are the changes from this current fiscal year to 1920, and everything highlighted are the changes. On the Central Marin Fire Authority side, the battalion chief, we had three battalion chiefs this fiscal year. With the consolidation, what we did is we were able to share services with Kentfield Fire and share a battalion chief. And so now our budget, we save one position, a battalion chief. We don't pay for that any longer. We share it with Kentfield, which is great. We also, with the consolidation, went from 3 firefighter paramedics. It's that last bottom box there. We went from 3 to 6. We now have 3-person engine companies, which was a big deal for us. So that's the good news. Continued good news is over in Public Works. So on the engineering side, the first box there, the senior civil engineer, we had 2. We've added a 3rd. Again, that's to really deliver these projects. On the maintenance side, what you'll see is we didn't add positions on the maintenance side, but we now, last fiscal year, we had 2 senior maintenance workers and 6 maintenance workers. We now still have the same amount of employees, but it's 4 and 4. So we've really evaluated the strengths and weaknesses of our team and the experience, and we've been able to promote a couple very successful. We had 2 part-time equipment mechanics last fiscal year. Moving forward, we made 1 full-time position. And then what's before you is the project manager. And so we're gonna talk about this. But really what we did is we went within this budget 2 years, what are we going to deliver, but really a 5-year plan and going, what do we want to deliver and what do we need to deliver it? And how are we delivering it now? The Sales Oversight Committee, we've had a number of conversations and pointed it out. We're spending a lot of time and money on consulting. And so there's pros and cons to that. Sometimes you save money, sometimes you pay more. In our case, we pay a lot more for project management and delivering these. Substantial in the staff report and the attachment. Peter's going to go through it. It was shocking. RJ Suko, our senior engineer, really brought this up to us and said, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so through that, we're staffing up. We think this is the team we need, and we're kind of excited to share the project manager position with you. It's a little bit unique because we kind of changed how we hire full-time employees. And we went out and we recruited this position, and this is a 5-year contract position. So it's a full-time employee, fully benefited. The salary is the equivalent of the superintendent of public works, but it's a 5-year at-will position. At the end of the 5 years, we can renew it. We can actually end the contract at any point during that 5 years. And so we think this is the right way to go moving forward. It's substantial savings. One of the nuances to this specific position, though, would be it's for project management of the CIP, the capital improvement projects we're trying to deliver. And so with that, we would save substantial money in project management, but we would ask that the reimbursement cover it through the sales tax measure. And so we'll walk you through the mechanics of that and what that means. And the vice mayor has also been part of this conversation. And so I would ask him to jump in here too and give his feedback. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter and walk you through what we're talking about.
Thanks, Mr. Cusmano. Mayor, members of the council, just real briefly before we leave this org chart slide, the only things I wanted to add, or that we have been about a year without a superintendent of public works. We're hoping to fill that position this summer as well. And that's part of the reason why you see 4 senior maintenance workers. Those guys have really stepped up. So Jamie King, Vernon Santos, Odolan Velasquez, and Gary Downing have stepped up and really helped carry that department. I'll talk more specifically about the field project manager position, but the thing that's not up there that was in Daria's budget presentation is Adam and I are looking at partnering at an associate planner level position that if we bring this back to you, we'll highlight a little more clearly. But that's a need that both he and I have, and we think there's a way to partner on that. And if we just turn our attention for the next couple minutes to the project manager position, again, this is not an action item. It's a review. Give us your comments on it. If we want to formalize the action, we'll bring it back to you at a later date. But from our standpoint, this really comes down to inspections and construction management. Because our capital delivery schedule is going up with the addition of a senior civil engineer with a really organized, strong team ready to increase our capital delivery. We have a dedicated associate civil engineer that focuses a lot of time on the sanitary district, which is freeing up time for the other engineers. So what we're lacking is what we call construction management primarily. And that's, RJ Suko, our senior engineer who helped really put together the bulk of this analysis. I would turn you to the table on page 4 of the staff report. What we typically do is there's line items that are pretty standard calcs. We like to have, for example, a 10 to 15% contingency. San Francisco prefers 25% contingency. We try to keep it below that. Construction management is commonly 10% of the cost, and that's making sure that while the project is being delivered, it's inspected properly, it's well coordinated with all of the contractors, traffic control is done right. All the things that are on the ground require construction management. And as you noticed in the staff report, there's a list of other tasks that are really important for us to be able to deliver in-house as opposed to contracting. And so just so everybody's clear, we have all of these really queued up and ready to go fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 construction projects and field tasks. They're all listed for you there. Their approximate construction cost, what we would normally pay for consultant services on construction management. If we fill this position, we are looking at a much reduced cost. So that third column is what we still might allocate to an outside consultant to help us. But if we bring in the right person, we're certainly going to be able to save really a large amount of money in that $300,000 to $400,000 range, because that just speaks to how much capital projects we're going to be delivering and what they cost. And we see this opportunity to bring this service in-house. And I also like the 5-year, as Todd mentioned, doing a 5-year contract, having an option to renew for a year or two if it's going well. We can also check our budget. Our budget looks good in 5 years. If it doesn't, we can reevaluate and really have a good field test of how well this position works. So I'm happy to take any questions of the council at this time.
Great. Thank you so much. Questions? Questions, yes.
2 questions, if I may. First question, you said that the current situation with the maintenance workers, the 4 and 4, is partly reflective of the fact that there's not been a superintendent for a year. Does that suggest that once we fill the position of superintendent, the situation with maintenance workers staffing will change?
I don't believe so. Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Beckman. I think it's more that there's a couple people, as Todd mentioned, that had been maintenance workers for 15 or 18 years and really deserve to be senior maintenance workers, both in their skills and ability and responsibility. The other thing I was pointing out is that those 4 senior maintenance workers have been filling a gap for about a year on the vacancy.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, good for them. That's awesome. And then one clarification, in RJ's sort of cost savings analysis table here, the $175,000 that is the new field project manager cost, that includes benefits and pension, right?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
Questions? So basically, you're asking to replace consultant fees with a staff position and save us a bunch of money.
For the next 5 years, yes.
Is that a fair summation?
Yeah. Although it's not an action item, but if it were, that would be the action.
Okay, just curious. I just want to make sure I understood it. I think I did. Okay. Comments from the public? Anybody wish to comment on this item? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring it back to the council for direction,
Well, only,
right?
Don't what?
well, I'd like to make a point.
Yes.
And I think Todd mentioned it. In the past with, the consultant fees have been rolled into the project costs that were paid by whichever fund was paying for the project. For all these projects, we're going to allocate a portion of this possible new contract employees' cost is sort of overhead to that project. So it would end up being paid for out of the sales tax override money if it's a project that's funded by the override. So,
Okay.
okay. So it's, as opposed to, I know initially when we, years ago when we talked about it, it was sort of like override was not going to have any employee cost.
Right.
And this is sort of like, wait.
This is attaching some employee
Yeah,
costs to it.
so.
To deliver capital.
Yeah, to deliver capital.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I mean, it just seems brutally clear and a really good job. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
the direction from me would be 100% please, but I don't know what the other council members
I
think.
would concur.
And I would also concur. Now, it's completely kosher to say to someone, you've got a mid-term contract, a 5-year contract without any expectation of longer than that, and say, at will, anytime, they're. This, in fact, is true.
I'm at will as well. Todd can ask me to go away at any time for any reason. Yeah, so we're not concerned about that. I think, Mr. Kuhnhart, the more salient point that you might be getting at is, this is a very specific skill set. So the person who comes in and fills this role is going to have to be skilled in construction management, in field assignments, in delivering capital. The construction industry background should be very strong. So, finding someone who has that skill set, our current job descriptions for anybody in public works maintenance doesn't have this skill set. So that's another reason why we had to create, or we look to create, this new position. I'm more concerned about that than 5 years with an option to renew if everybody's happy. So.
I like it.
I mean, it's also creative and smart, innovative thinking. So I don't know who gets the compliment, both you, Peter, Todd, somebody else, but fantastic.
We'll give most of it to RJ and then Todd and I for supporting.
It also puts a guy on the street in charge of stuff who we can talk to, who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not just a
And knows the
consultant
town.
from somewhere else.
Yeah, and it isn't just kind of going, whoa. So, no, I think it's great. Okay, then we can move on to 6E, review the proposed capital improvement program budget for fiscal years 2019-20 and 2020-21. And providing direction, again, we are not voting on this.
Okay, thank you. You may have noticed there are 2 items regarding the capital budget on the agenda. Public Works will present their capital budget, which can explain the projects themselves much more thoroughly than I could. But the staff report and what I've prepared is an explanation of what the various funds are that are at part of the capital budget, and they're listed in the staff report. And then there is beginning on page 4, there's a spreadsheet that shows all of the projects by type, and then what sources of funds are expected to pay for them. And then on the following page, there's another spreadsheet, which is for the next year, for 2020-21. And then the rest of the items, each fund has its own 2 spreadsheets, one showing the beginning and ending balance and a summary, and then the next one with a little more detail. So unless anybody feels differently, maybe I'll start with the sales tax override fund, because that seems like that's one that people are very interested in. And that begins on page 5. And you can see that the beginning balance this year was over $7 million in 2018-19, and we're expecting to spend about $1.3 million and to collect about $3.3 million. So there'll be a balance of about nearly $9.5 million. That's what we're expecting at the end of this year. And so that'll be the beginning balance, of course, for next year, and then we'll collect about $4 million. And then the projects on page 5 are divided up by what type they are, whether they're fire prevention or flood control or whatever category they fall into, and then the following pages, the next few pages, sort of attempt to show the exact expenditures, and recognizing that some of the expenditures don't have anything to do with capital projects, but they're still being paid for by the sales tax fund. I've highlighted in yellow, beginning on page 6, fire prevention, for weed abatement and code enforcement, and then on the following page, senior and youth projects, disaster preparedness, repairs and maintenance of town hall facilities, as those they're not really part of the capital budget, but they're being paid for by the sales tax fund. And then the following page, just because some of the categories are so broad, streets or safe routes to school, I've listed the various projects there so that you can see what those totals are comprised of. And then the other funds, let's see, the sales tax.
I'm sorry, Dar, before you go on.
Yes.
Town infrastructure is the biggest number by far.
Yes. So
and that's not one of the.
Yes. So let's see. We'll go back to that spreadsheet on. Let's see, what page is that? This.
You're on page 5 of the expenditures, and there are the 5 or 6 enumerated ones that I think appeared in the tax measure itself.
Yes.
But then there's these 2 or 3 that are.
Yes. So on the spreadsheet that just directly follows the staff report, this page, you'll see under town-owned facilities, there is. You'll see that the town hall addition is $1.8 million. This page, I don't know if you.
What's the page number?
It says 1 on it. It's directly following the staff report. It's the first page of the attachment.
Okay, hang on, sorry.
Yes.
Just let me get there if you don't mind. Okay, I'm there, page 1.
So this is the page that breaks down the various types of expenditures. And under town-owned facilities, you'll see Town Hall addition, $1.8 million. That's, I think, what you're talking about. And then there are, temporary modular office and ADA improvements, $100,000, and then just, maintenance of the town hall and fire station, $70,000.
Okay, thank you.
And that's in the 2019-2020 budget year. So at the end of 2019-20, the expected balance in that fund, let's see, I lost my place here, I think will be about $5 million. Let me just look here. It will be about, about $8 million. And then the following year, 2020-21, it will be about $2.6 million. And about 0.5 of that may be the reserve that was discussed. So it's expected that a good deal of a good portion of the current balance of this this fund will be expended over the next 2 years. And did you want me to go over the other funds, or was there a particular fund, or did you want the Public Works Director to explain any of the projects?
I just have a question.
Yeah,
if
go
I
ahead.
may. Thank you, sir. I see fire prevention expenses listed on the spreadsheets for the sales tax override fund,
Yes.
but I don't see any mention of fire prevention expenses on page 1 on this overview.
Let's see, on page,
So like, for example, they are highlighted on
right,
page
right,
6.
right. These are just the capital projects.
So we do not consider those capital projects.
No, yeah, so I highlighted them within the budget of the sales tax fund because they weren't, on the public works spreadsheet for capital projects, but yet they're being paid for by the sales tax fund. So I was trying to show that even though they weren't capital projects, they're still being paid for by the sales tax fund.
Okay.
There didn't really seem to be a way to just show them by themselves outside of the capital fund, but maybe there is.
But there was language in the override
Yes.
motion that covers those.
Right, that's why they're in there, yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
So are you suggesting that we kind of move on to the next item to simplify this?
Well, if you'd like, if you have any questions about any of my spreadsheets, or if you want me to go over all of the funds, I'm happy to do so, but,
I'm totally comfortable moving on.
Okay.
Because Peter can talk specifically
Okay.
about projects, which will help, I think,
Yeah,
add
all good.
context to all of this, right? Is that okay with everybody if we just do that? Okay. I just think that'll help us follow it and make this, I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Peter, you're up.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I'm understanding correctly, we're just going to combine these two items, or?
I think we're
Okay.
kind of rolling them together because
Okay,
we're
got
providing
it.
direction.
Yeah, easy
and
enough.
This
So
is going
this-
to provide context
Sure.
for the budget.
Also not an action item, so yeah, kicking off the next item, which is 6F for those following along. This is we're asking for your input, review, and comment on the 2020-2021 Capital Improvement Program. Again, this is a multi-step process. This is the first cut at it. Please feel free to email us with any of your deep thoughts later on, or talk about it at the next meeting, or talk about them now. But as you recall, last year, at least some of you that were on the council, we developed a capital improvement program, and we're just updating the existing one, and we're doing a 2-year budget. So those are the main changes that you'll see. This 6-page document that describes the program, I think, has been updated as well, and it's a nice guiding document. I would point you, if you haven't read it, this is actually what you're talking about now, is how does the CIP relate to the budget? So on page 2 of the CIP document, I tried to explain the relationship between the CIP and budget. They're close, they're not identical. I think that's helpful.
Oh, I've got it.
And then the last piece is maybe the one we want to spend a little time with your detailed questions on, and that is the draft CIP that's in the tables in the back. So just so everyone's aware, the capital improvement program is broken into these categories. The first one is flood control and storm drainage. The next one is multimodal transportation. Those are the most expensive programs that the town operates and funds. Everything else behind that, including capital programs, which is often planning documents for the planning and building department, as well as park and recs. They have a few capital improvements. Our environmental programs and the town-owned facilities is a separate category. We're also going to talk about the sanitary district CIP at a later meeting and later item. But the one thing that's new that we didn't do last year, which I hope is helpful for you, is at the end of the spreadsheets, we developed a list of completed projects. So what I asked the staff to do is, hey, you know what? A lot of these are coming off, and in the past, typically when you remove something from the CIP, it's because it's done. But I wanted you all to see, and the community to see, the level of projects that we've completed and the dollar amounts that we spent by the June 30th, about a month from now. It's a long list, and I'm proud of the accomplishments, and I hope it continues to grow over the next few years, as is projected in the budget. So I think the best thing to do at this point is to just take any questions or comments you have on the CIP.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
I did want to add one thing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, go right ahead.
As he was so succinct, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for tonight, but if we want to come back and spend some time on this question, Councilmember Bailey brought it up, and it has come up with the Finance Committee and the Sales Tax Oversight Committee. It's another discussion we'll be having on June 4th when we meet with both committees. But there's been a question of, well, does town infrastructure include facilities? And so when you look at the definition in the Webster Dictionary of town infrastructure, it does include facilities. That was always staff's intent. It goes hand in hand with the streets and roads and the infrastructure to provide a service to a community. We put that, you know, in our brochures and our community discussions, we were always clear on what that should look like. But there's been discussion and questions of should it be included in the sales tax measure. Per law, and the way it's written, it can be used for anything. But we've really made this a capital improvement kind of budget and disaster preparedness budget. And so we can talk about that. Those are the clear, and then an emergency preparedness fund. So the question, I think, is very important that the council should provide direction at some point within the next 3 meetings is, do you agree or not that town facilities should be involved in that infrastructure? Because when you go through the CIP plan, you have town infrastructure is in there. You have facilities. You have some improvements to the community center. You have improvements in a rebuild of town hall. So in my mind, when I read it, in my little world that I've been in, I feel like it's clear and I can argue it and it's justified. But again, I don't make that decision. This council does. And so I think it is something that we should discuss, and it's at the end of the night, and so it doesn't have to be tonight, but if it's council's direction, we can come back with why we think it should be included or not, and we can have a discussion at the next meeting. I'm just not sure where you all stand on that.
The question is, should facilities improvement be considered as a capital expenditure? Did I get that?
No.
Or,
Well, I think the question is, are facilities infrastructure? Is that,
well,
was it?
let me ask the question other way. Do we have enough non-committed revenue in the operating fund that we could pay to build the town hall annex out of a surplus in that? Or from just a cash flow standpoint, are we going to just have to use the sales tax money?
So I'll be really clear, and when we wouldn't have gone with Measure F. I mean, you have so many words in that little paragraph. I'll argue that it's open-ended, and we have the town attorney that can weigh in on that. But what I'll tell you is you cannot, without having a bond measure or increasing taxes, repair any of the facility. You can't repair our facilities. It's impossible. Okay, and so when we talk about infrastructure, we were clear. You only have so many words. Infrastructure is infrastructure, and if a town hall isn't the infrastructure of your community that provides the service, so that's where we're coming from. But if we're not clear on that, then we should probably have a discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Do you want to do that right now, or do you want to come back
It's
to
up to you.
that?
I don't know if it's.
We should think on it a bit, I
If
think.
it's a question.
Okay, so
because-
we should think on it a bit, and the question being, should facilities improvement be considered infrastructure?
Well, I believe it is in the
No,
language, and so, go ahead.
I don't think that's the issue at all.
Okay.
Clearly, infrastructure is within the definition, and I don't have any legal concerns about whether somebody stole my thing again. I'd asked for repeatedly.
6 font? You want that?
What people voted for explicitly says that they voted for the tax, or the revenue, I should say, for annually for unrestricted general revenue purposes. And then there's a for example, and they list 4 or 5 things: flood, sea level rise, disaster preparedness, fire prevention, street repair, traffic flow, safety improvements, 9/11 response, and senior youth programs. So legally, to my non-expert interpretation, it's clearly unrestricted. You can use it for whatever you like. My question is kind of a moral one, which is that when it was sold to the public, it was intended to be a little more narrowly tailored, I think. I have no concerns. So let me go a little further, just because we're talking about capital projects. Peter, as typical, you and Todd or whoever did a fantastic job. These are clear. The priorities of the town are exactly right. I have no problem with the amount of money spent or the prioritization or any of it. It's like A+ work. It's fantastic. I'm 100% behind it. The decision to replace the town's structure here is badly needed. It's unambiguous to me we have to do that. I don't know what the right amount is. I'm going to trust you guys to figure that out. Again, my sole issue here is whether the dedicated funds from the sales tax override measure ought to be those funds dedicated to do that portion of the infrastructure update. Now, Todd, you keep talking about infrastructure. That word does not appear in the measure. It does appear in the brochure on the back page under the frequently asked questions. I don't deny that that word appears in here. My, just trying to be intellectually honest, observation of what we all are in favor of is whether we are accounting for the use of that money in the manner with which it was originally intended. Not what it's legally allowed to be used, but for which people voted for it. That's all.
And what I would say is that being that I cheerleaded that measure and every community member that I spoke to, and in a lot of the literature that we put out there, we talked about infrastructure and facilities, and not specific like a specific project, but what it could be used for and the importance of that. And so,
Todd, I agree with how important it is. The word infrastructure does not appear in the bond measure.
Councilmember Bailey, the connection that I would make is a pretty simple one. It's that if we're asking a moral question about are we being transparent with the voters when we ask them to approve, we ask them to approve. We give a lot of for examples.
Yes.
All of those projects need to be delivered by people typically in a workplace.
I agree. I thought about that.
So that's
Peter.
the connection for me, is that we don't have, we're squatting in the firehouse, the Public Works Engineering team is. We need to get out of there. We do not have staff space to adequately serve them at the counter. So the connection for me for the capital delivery is really having a viable workspace using the funds as they're proposed in the budget to deliver the capital goods the community is waiting on. We can't deliver the same amount of goods in the current infrastructure without a town hall addition.
I totally agree with this. So you know where I'm coming down on this. I'm talking it out as we go, guys. I don't have a firm opinion about it, but as I'm talking out as we go, I agree you can't deliver those other services from you need a place to do it. I just wanted to pause a little bit and just talk it through so we have a clear understanding. The single biggest expenditure from the sales tax money is going to be to do the facility from which all our people direct all these other things. Is that fair?
For the first year, but remember, for the first year or two, that's true. But we anticipate Measure F revenues continuing to come in,
Yep.
and we have what is before you is a 2-year budget with a 5-year lookout.
Yep.
So if you look at the most expensive columns in the CIP before you, and when you asked about who put this together, Jared Barrio did. He did a great job. We couldn't have done this without him. But the biggest expenditure is in years 22 through 24. So that is contingent upon having the new facility in place and the new workspace in place to deliver those big capital dollars in the final 3 years.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
No, it's an important one. And again, I go back to, when you have 75 words or less, you have to hit the legal marks and you have to do it. And what I'm going to tell
Todd,
you.
I think we're protected legally. That's not my issue
it's
at all.
not legally. This
Okay.
is the transparent, because it's
Yeah.
my voice. I led this charge, and so I'm going to be really clear, how I feel about it. And so it goes back to anything that we attach to this 75 words when we talk to our community. It's not on the back page. It's on the first page. And this is the message that's here, and this is what we told everyone. The town is faced with approximately $50 million in further unmet needs on ongoing repair and maintenance of roads, flood control infrastructure, parks, and community facilities, replacement of equipment, firefighting, and it goes through it. And so our message has always been clear. And so I'm just, I just feel.
But when you say community facilities, that's the term that you're seizing on to say that explicitly refers to building a new public, I don't know what you'd call it, public building of some sort.
I would actually say even the word infrastructure. When you talk about capital improvement projects and infrastructure of a town, I think they go hand in hand in conversation. And they go hand in hand.
I mean, I think I agree with that, guys. I didn't mean to. I'm just thinking it through.
The brochure, please. Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think Councilmember Bailey's raised a good question in a very good way. On the other hand, a little over a year ago, when we were campaigning for Measure F, I went to all of the public sessions, and I was a part of the conversation, and I signed the document that went on onto the ballot. Infrastructure was heavily used.
Yeah.
And I don't think that in my, over 20 years of experience in real estate, there can be any distinction and separation of buildings and public facilities. And if we add to this we have more public space for all the volunteers that work in our town so terrifically. On the other hand, I've got a question, which is, can we, since we have a significant surplus on the operating side, is there any reason why we can't put some of the funds, other than the $2.5 million reserve that we've just, or one, I'm sorry, $2.1 million separate line item, into the capital improvements budget? I mean, I think the capital improvements budget over the next 5+ years has a shortage, it has a shortfall, right? And so is there anything that keeps us from pushing some of our operating funds towards those capital?
So a quick answer, something we've been really sensitive to in the budget part of this project, it can't be at the expense of the other important projects. And so, we have put an estimate on how we're going to spend that monies and what we can spend and what we can't. And so that's that question. If you want to use the operating budget, we'll just do some quick math. Currently projected at the end of this fiscal year, we have about $5 million. $2 million of that is restricted. It's the 10% reserve, so you have $3 million. We currently, on the books, have a $1.9 million deficit for the Corte Madera Center. So subtract that from your remaining funds, and you have a few $100,000. Within the few $100,000, you have an equipment replacement fund of $500,000, and then the Park and Rec fund. And so really, you have $0 to spend on anything outside of the restricted reserves. So the answer is no. And that's one of the reasons why we look towards Measure F to provide options for us. Now, is it the number one priority? It's a big one, but is it at the expense of anything else? It isn't. If it was, then I think it's a different conversation as well for staff to this council. So.
What's the total dollars?
Okay. So where are we?
Well, I'd just like to bring us back to the item before you, and that's this CIP. The budget started.
I think that's probably a good idea. Can we come back? Can we revisit this item at a future meeting? And because I think people are still here to hear about the capital improvement budget.
Okay. So just the last things I'd say is, again, this is a review and comment. We want to bring this to you in draft form, which is what is before you today. We will bring you a final on June 4th. We'd like both the budget and the CIP program to get adopted in the month of June by the council, so it sets us up for the next fiscal year. So again, if you have any comments now, let me know. You're also welcome to contact Daria or I on either of the two items between meetings.
So we'll start with questions from the council about the capital improvement budget and the projects. I'm going to take the easy one, which is $15 million tidal barrier. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what you're thinking with that, since that's, I think, far and away the largest item?
Yeah, that is the biggest item in the CIP. It's one that was on the CIP several years ago. It carried forward to last, and it's carrying forward again. You'll also notice there's no money allocated to it. Right. It's in the out years, and so that to me expresses a need, a potential need. What we're really doing with all of the large term investments is we're waiting for the climate adaptation plan to be completed. We're going to get some recommendations out of that. When that is discussed, it'll have some CIP recommendations in it. And so that, in my opinion, will really drive and revamp this CIP. So, I mean, I think it was in there for $3 or $4 million. There's no way we could build any tidal barrier for that amount of money. And so the only thing we did this time is based on permitting, current costs, the type of engineering we would need to do for a tidal barrier, we put a number in there that we thought was more reasonable than the prior number.
So there's no specific project behind it yet. This is just money you're setting aside saying, we're going to need a lot of money.
If we do it, if we do something, it will be very expensive, and it probably won't be all paid for by the town. The most likely scenario that I would recommend is that if something is done of this magnitude, that the property owners would pitch in through some kind of property assessment, if it's something which would require a vote, obviously. It's a very complex scenario, so this is a placeholder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
questions?
Well, that kind of hit on a question that I have, which is I'm just a little unsure of how to assess this when we have so much of this is tied to the sort of looming climate adaptation plan, which is a big unknown for a lot of big, expensive, important projects. Can you kind of shed a little light on how the climate adaptation plan might change or inform an evolution of this CIP?
Yeah, I think for me, Councilmember Beckman, the most critical program is the flood control and storm drainage. The projects that are before you, funded in fiscal years 2020 and 2021, you can see we're running right about $800,000. If you recall, when we had a flood control tax or a flood tax, a parcel tax, that brought in around $650,000, $660,000. So one thing that I wanted to do in being transparent with the voters is we said, you know what, if you approve this sales tax measure, we think we can increase the amount we spend on flood control. So that, I want to make sure that that annual amount is in that 800 range, and that's reflected here. These are all items 1 through 16 that are kind of independent of any climate adaptation outcomes as far as I'm concerned, say the levee project. What we have done in talking with the flood board and with the community through the flood board agendas is we have been pausing large $1 to $2 million new pump stations, say in Marina Village or Mariner Cove. We've also not been we've invested about $5 million in slotted drains over the past 4 years. We don't have any big, expensive $1 to $3 million slotted drain projects in here. There may be other solutions that we'd like. So what you see before you is independent of the climate adaptation plan in this particular category.
Okay.
Other questions from the council about? No. If not, then I will open it up to the public for comments or questions about the capital improvement program proposal.
Patty Stolier, Casa Buena Drive, and of course I'm going to ask, what are the numbers that are assigned to senior and youth program and disaster preparedness for?
So for the upcoming years, is that what you're asking for? Disaster preparedness, there's a disaster preparedness coordinator, I think is her title, neighborhood response coordinator. A good portion of it is for that. There are disaster preparedness supplies, as well as trainings and that sort of thing. That's what that is for. And then the senior and youth programs, those are programs that would be put on through the community center and the recreation department. Do you know?
Yeah, so the disaster preparedness budget from the sales tax measure is $125,000 this upcoming year. We also have fire prevention and code enforcement of $100,000. We have a vegetation management program, which also consists of our chipper program. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's $350,000. And we also have $50,000 allocated for senior youth programs. The intent this fiscal year is to expand the hours of our part-time help to serve the intergenerational center.
Thank you.
Good evening, Roy Wolford, 37 Seawolf Passage. Going to the moral dilemma of using the sale tax funds for CIP projects, is there any restriction on using those funds for the sewer mains and lateral replacement?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to take a crack at that. We do tend to separate out our sanitary district board activities, budget, it's all separate. So, I don't see a ready connection between Measure F sales tax revenue and sanitary district uses, although I don't know if legal counsel wants to weigh in on that.
Anything else, Todd? No? No?
I think Teresa's about to say something.
What's that?
Oh, she's not.
No.
You look like you were leaning forward, no?
No. Council's not saying anything?
Just what's more critical, to the town, having facilities and putting money into facilities, or mitigating potential damages and fines from sewer overflow. Something to think about.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to comment or have questions on this item? I will bring it back to the council then for further discussion, questions, any direction wish to be provided. Going once.
No, I think we're good. The five are good with it, right? We're good with it. Good luck. God bless.
I think so. Thank you.
When does action occur on this? When does action by us occur on this?
Again, so we will meet with the Finance and Oversight Committees on June 4th. We'll come back to you the first meeting in June. Again, this will probably be a shorter conversation, but maybe specific in scope if you have any further any questions for us. And then the second meeting in June, we'll hold the public hearing for approval of the CIP and the budget. Okay. Moving on then to item 7, Town Manager Report. I'm going to, just really quick, I'm going to have our Planning and Building Director give you a quick update on the Marsh Project, the Golden Gate Marsh Project. But I also wanted to give an update and some kudos to Marla Orth, who is helping us with our vegetation management and chipper programs. I have copies of this. Does everyone have a copy of this?
I got 3.
If not, okay. And I'll also provide it to the public too. I'm just very impressed with the work of Todd Lando from a fire prevention standpoint, our fire marshal. But Marla's just been outstanding with what she's done. And I just want to give you some specific numbers as we start to head into the fire season and really try to help our community. You all know they got the letter of the requirements of the ordinance, but what we try to do, instead of having a stick, we try to help them. And so this chipper program is a big part of it. Also, we're about to do a $250,000 project up all the way up to the top of Christmas Tree Hill, both public and private roadway infrastructure to help them basically reduce the vegetation through that corridor. It's been 10 plus years since we've remove the foliage from that community, and so we're really excited about that. But specific to the chipper program, you can see the statistics. Fairview, Meadowcrest Ridge, 18 homeowners removed over 100 cubic yards of vegetation. Hidden Valley NRG, 75 homeowners removed 120 cubic yards of fuel. Upper Chapman NRG, 83 homeowners removed 470 cubic yards. Meadow Sweet Casa Buena, over 40 cubic yards of broom, and a total of 440 cubic yards were removed. Lower Chapman, 360 homeowners, 210 cubic yards. Chapman, 130 homeowners are scheduled for that removal on June 6th. Again, I talked about Christmas Tree Hill. 285 homeowners will be positively impacted. We will help them with vegetation management removal. To date, we've removed over 202.5 tons of vegetation, and it's the first 6 weeks of the program. So very successful. It's within the sales tax measure, dollars at work. We have $250,000 in this budget, $350,000 next budget, and we're going to attack this thing year-round and really position us in a positive position. Something else that's important, we received a grant. It's over $500,000, and so we're going to do that work next year, fire season, and it's going to be a break that goes all the way through the ridgeline from Mill Valley all the way down to Fairfax. And so we're really going to start to protect our community and do the work that we so desperately need. And again, Marla, it hasn't been easy to really rally these neighbors, to work with staff, to really start a program from scratch that's not in writing and really attack this thing. And so I really give her kudos. I appreciate her, and this is outstanding first step work. So I just wanted to share that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to give you an update on one of the projects.
Hello again. This is just a quick update on the Golden Gate Bridge District's marsh restoration project. It's a 4-acre project. I believe the council has seen a couple of presentations on this in the past, but so this is really just an update on the status of that. And then I've prepared a draft comment letter that you'll see in front of you, and I'll get to that in a second. But just to give you an update on where in the process this project is, earlier in April, the Bridge District sent out a draft initial study proposed mitigated negative declaration, which is the document that sort of assesses the environmental impacts of their marsh restoration project. That's a 30-day required public review comment period in compliance with the CEQA requirements. Last week, they were here actually in this room for a public meeting to explain the project and solicit comments from any interested members of the community and the public. And that comment period ends in May 26th. So actually, I think it's actually on Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, which is a separate conversation. but by all means, by May 24th, any public comments should really be in to them. And then on, I believe they say June 21st, they have a meeting with their board to adopt the CEQA document and I believe also weigh in on the project as a whole. So with that, staff did look at the CEQA document, and both Peter and I attended the meeting last Wednesday. We don't have any specific concerns or comments on the adequacy of the document. I think it's a thorough document itself. We did prepare a comment letter which more or less raises some support and talks about general overall support for the project purpose and its goals, and also includes, I think, more or less a desire to continue collaborative discussions on project implementation and specific details of the plan itself, which specifically are called out in this draft level letter that is before you, and also in the back for the public if anybody would like to look at it, but specifically calling out the desire to continue conversations about the fence details, which will be erected post-construction or restoration, and the grading plan, sort of construction logistics, making sure that we're coordinated with them as they do the project implementation, and reminding them that we're also in the middle of a climate adaptation plan study and that we may be seeking their participation in those efforts moving forward. So just wanted to bring to your attention sort of our draft comments. This isn't an action item or anything like that, but just wanted to give you a heads up on what staff intends to send over to the Golden Gate Bridge District regarding, at this time, given that we're in the public comment period for the mitigated negative declaration. And we're happy to, we have until Friday, I think, to get the letter out. So if you have any specific comments following this meeting, we're happy to take those.
You got something?
Go ahead, Jim.
Are they going to be hauling away a considerable amount of soil?
No, the proposal is not to haul away a considerable amount of soil. There will be some vegetation removal at the beginning of the project, just because there's some trees, but they actually will keep all of the soil on site and create some topography as a result, uplands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. Adam, can you just remind me or explain to me who has authority over the marsh? Who owns the property, and is it permanently dedicated, and are there restrictions, and are they required to cooperate? I know we're all going to cooperate together, but is there a requirement that either what's the story there? Can you just explain to me?
Should have come to the open house last week.
I'm sorry, I missed that. So thank you for admonishing me publicly, David. I will remember that. Adam?
Okay. Peter Brown looks like he's going to address this. Is that what's...
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to if Adam,
go ahead.
If you want to add anything, chime in. But one of the things about the marsh, some people call it the Musi Marsh, the Corte Madera Marsh. It has multiple property owners. There's a PG&E easement through it. A portion is owned by the Marin Audubon Society. A portion is owned by the town. There's Smart right away out there. Smart's a property owner. and of course the Golden Gate Bridge and Highways District. I think Army Corps even owns some of the land out there. So there's a lot of players. The particular site that the MND is about is 4 acres. It's a small portion of the total of the 72 acres that the Golden Gate Bridge and Highway District owns.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the council for Adam on this?
Well, I went to the open house 1 week ago, and actually, it's a really good-looking project. I think it's been carefully handled, and I'm particularly impressed with the sort of reservations that you're expressing. Yes, but we are reserving. So I like the way your letter is handled, and I think it's. I'm looking forward to it myself.
I just wanted to thank Adam and Peter for being proactive. Lessons learned on the Autobahn Society, their project last time, and I think
Yes.
checks and balances and so they caught this, and I just appreciate staff's response.
Thank you. Anything else from the town manager? Okay, council member reports.
Can I ask a question on the prior that we went through very, very quickly? When is the Christmas Tree Hill action? It says will, but when will that?
So a letter did go out of the
Yes.
actions that they're going to take, and we're prepared to commence that work over the next 2 weeks. And so they're putting things in
Great.
place now.
And I think some of it's already started miraculously. I mean, I put out a big pile of stuff next to the roadway thinking it would be 3 weeks to go. It's gone. Okay, okay.
And I'm happy, being that is your neighborhood, I'm happy to work through you too, Councilmember, as we go for updates or.
It would help. Thank you.
You got it.
Town council reports.
I've got 2 very quick things in connection with the Transportation Authority. First of all, there is pending, there are 2 construction projects that are pending this year, both of which are about to be put out to bid, but they're not out to bid yet. And we've been warned that if the bids come in, as many are coming in significantly over, that they won't necessarily be able to be completed so quickly. One is the north-south connector across Corte Madera Creek, which is putting a wide pathway out to the east of the crossing of Corte Madera Creek. And the other is some exit improvements off of 101 northbound to Bellum that will significantly increase the flow through there. So those are both designed, ready to go, about to be bid, not yet bid yet. And now some people may have seen exit work, northbound exits onto 101 at the Tiburon Y and Mill Valley connector, right? And there are other improvements. Well, we're going to be slated to have improvements on our northbound, and I don't know what the schedule is for that. That's all budgeted. Caltrans has put out public notification, but the notice of exactly when it's going to start is a little unclear, I think.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sufficient? Thank you.
Eli.
Thank you, sir. Attended a CMSA meeting. The primary attraction was the draft budget, which was unremarkable, so I figured that's a pretty good sign. An interesting little revenue source that they're going to create is they're going to start leasing some unused portion of their corporation yard to Marin Transit and Marin Airporter to park buses there. So that's an interesting little move they're making there. Also attended a League of Cities North Bay Division meeting, and the discussion was about the various housing bills that are kind of brewing in Sacramento right now. Senator Wiener came and spoke and delivered the news, which overjoyed a lot of the people there, that his bill, SB 50, was held in committee.
Did people cheer?
People did not cheer, but they were definitely they were smiling, and he took it in stride. It was. But so that's, I think, kind of the big news out of that is that SB 50 is held in committee. I have here this handout that just sort of summarizes the different housing-related bills that are under consideration right now and sort of compares their different aspects. And if anybody wants to take a look at it, it is here.
McGuire's SB4 is also on hold.
Well, no, 4 got merged into 50.
Okay, right.
And then the hybrid got put in
hybrid
the
is-
suspense file.
Reports?
You know, I did, you and I both, Mr. Mayor, attended the Central Rhone Police Authority meeting and the Fire Council as well. But given the hour, and by the way, the two other councils I attended was the Marine Clean Energy meeting and a Ross Valley Paramedic Authority. I wonder if I might defer reporting on that until our next meeting.
Absolutely, we can do that. I'm with you.
That'll break my heart.
Jim?
I was going to comment on the chipper, but somebody beat me to it. So, anyway, that's it.
Yes, we're going to defer our reports till next time. And with that, we look at the draft agenda for June 4th. Any comments on the draft agenda item? Questions? We're going to be doing some follow-up from tonight. Okay, then hearing none, we are adjourned.
Then we got to do the sanitary thing, right?
Oh, yes.
Lest you forget.
Just when you think you're done.
The fun is never
Peter,
over.
please tell me this is efficient.
Okay, so we will now adjourn the town council meeting, and we will call to order the sanitary district number 2 meeting. Roll call?
Board Member Bailey.
Here.
Board Member Beckman.
Here.
Board Member Kuhnhart.
Here.
Board Vice President Andrews.
Yes.
President Ravazio.
Yes. Let's move on to open time for public comment. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the sanitary board? No? Okay. There are no presentations. There is a consent calendar. Purpose is to group items together. Items can be approved by a single motion. Is there any member of the public or staff who wishes to remove an item from the consent calendar? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
That's for items 4A and 4B.
Yes. Sorry.
That's all right.
Board Member Bailey.
Yes.
Board Member Beckman.
Yes.
Board Member Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Vice President Andrews.
Oh, yes.
President Ravazio.
Yes. There are no public hearings. We have a business item, 6A. Consideration and possible action to adopt resolution number 02/2019, implementing lower lateral capital improvement program pilot program. Staff report. Here. Looks like you're up on this, huh?
Thank you, President Ravazio, members of the board. I hope everyone had a chance to review both the staff report and the resolution. There's a lot of good information in here. What I want to do is get everyone a little background and then maybe highlight a few things in the staff report. A big part of the driver for these two programs really is discussions with the community. It's come out of our sanitary district private sewer lateral workshop. It's come out of discussions with council members. And then the third piece that you might not know all about is really being driven by the construction industry. So we have a couple of projects. One is around well, actually you voted on it on your last meeting, around a $2.9 million sewer rehab project. And so that project is closely tied to our pavement project for the next, for the 2019 year. And so what we've done, RJ Succo and Fernanda Stefanik and Jared Barrio and myself have really looked at how those two major multi-million-dollar capital investments will work, how they'll be staged, how they'll be delivered, how they'll be timed. As you can guess, all the underground work needs to be done first. So the sanitary district project is first. It'll be followed by the pavement project. And we want to make sure that for the pavement project, any roadways that are being repaved have sound sanitary district infrastructure underneath them, because we don't want to cut into the road for the next 10 to 15 years after we make such a big investment. So in order to do that efficiently, I would say the first program that really comes to light is the lower lateral CIP pilot program. So this program is one that is designed to enable us to deliver that sewer rehab project, as well as use some of our current surplus balance in the sanitary district fund to replace the lower laterals of the private property owners while we replace the main line of the sanitary district on multiple streets. We've done it differently, and we could do it differently, where we notify each of the property owners that this construction project is coming. You have a period of time where you can finish your lower lateral and your upper lateral. Typically, they do it all at one time. But here's your due date, and get it all done before here. If you do it after that date, and we've already done our work, it's going to cost you more money, a lot more money, to come in and do it. So because of the extent of the sewer main line repairs and the pavement project, it makes a lot of sense to us to wrap the replacement of the lower laterals into our main line replacement. It's easier for us to do it. We would ask the property owner to sign a sewer permit that says they still understand they're responsible for owning and maintaining the entire lateral. They can opt out of the program and not have the sanitary district use SD2 funds to fund what amounts to the replacement or improvement of private property. They can still do it themselves. They're going to have a strict deadline to meet if they choose that route. But for the most part, we believe that it's an efficiency program, and I think it's outlined the best we could do in the staff report. The other one I'll touch on is the pilot program. So when we adopted the private sewer lateral ordinance, we adopted a low-income program, mostly at the insistence of the board. We've only given out a couple grants. I think we set aside $50,000, and we still have a balance of $45,000 to $48,000. We're going to carry that forward in the next year. We're going to still keep running that grant program. Other sanitary districts, I think Ross Valley is a partner in CMSA, in the JPA with CMSA with us, the Joint Powers Agreement we have. They have a program that we're mimicking here. It's a $1,500 grant program, and this is basically something we've heard from the board and from members of the public. Someone can be taken aback, caught off guard. The town is initiating a CIP project, or the sanitary district is, and we come to you and say, hey, this is happening on your street. Please repair your lateral, and get it inspected before we finish our work. And you can be, thinking everything's good, and all of a sudden you get hit with a $15,000 bill or a $10,000 bill. They vary. Some are less, some are $5,000. But what we wanted to do is say, hey, you know what? If you get a permit and you get your work done, you're eligible for a $1,500 grant. And that comes out of the fees we've collected from every member of the district over the past number of years. And it helps offset that burden to the private property owner. Both of these programs, if they last, will probably kick us into looking at our service fees, our sewer collection fees, which we haven't raised since 2010. But that's a discussion for a later date. I think it is mentioned a couple of times in the staff report. And then again, the last part is the resolution. So the resolution, Teresa and I worked together closely on this, and kudos to her for a lot of what's in the resolution. I think we've covered our bases. We've attempted to operationalize the staff report and what the two programs would look like. And so the resolution contains all the specific language of how each of the programs work. And I don't know if anyone else on staff has any other comments, but I'll wrap mine then.
I just want to thank the district manager and his staff for the work that they did. This was a big deal of coming up with a policy. I think the funding mechanisms for both programs is appropriate and in the right range. One thing that I'll just respectfully, and I know it's late at night, but just respectfully disagree with the resolution on page 8. On section 3C, the disqualification factor. I'm just not so sure that I would recommend, not that you're asking me, but I do want to bring it to your attention. The disqualification factor. A property owner is disqualified from the PSL pilot grant program if the property has benefited from a lower lateral CIP pilot program, the PSL pilot grant program, or any other district or town funding assistant program in the last 10 years. I think the intent of the town is to join partnerships with our community to improve our infrastructure, our sidewalk programs, our sewer laterals when possible, and there's many others. And so I would hate to see someone improve their sidewalks and receive assistance from the town, but then they can't receive assistance for trying to improve their lower lateral. So I would respectfully request, I think it's an important conversation, I know what the district manager and the team's trying to do, but I would recommend that you consider deleting section C. I would also, I just anyone that wants to do an improvement for their property and we have the capability to help, there should always be a consideration. And that's just my 2 cents. I think that's been the direction of this board and council in the past. But again, that's just my comment.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Peter, Todd? Seth?
Well, it begs the question. We have what we affectionately dubbed the double dipping provision. And so what that gets at is we didn't see it as appropriate to say, oh, the town or the district in this case is going to replace your lower lateral with their main line replacement, and that will save the property owner $4,000 to $5,000. And then what we meant to say, and what we did say in the resolution, is you can't come and get a grant for $1,500 more because you've already used sanitary district funds on your private lateral. So that's different. I just wanted to point that out. That clause still exists in the pilot program for the CIP, the lower lateral replacement CIP. The section that Todd's talking about relates specifically to the grant program. So if you were to delete section C, that just means that if you're seeking a $1,500 grant, you'd be eligible for it even if you received prior assistance from the town.
Including from the lower lateral CIP pilot program?
I don't believe so.
I think the town manager is recommending deleting 3C entirely, so that would eliminate the double dipping concept if you did that with respect to the private sewer lateral grant program. I just wanted to remind the district manager that there is no double dipping provision in the lower lateral provision as drafted. So the only double dipping provision is the one that the town manager is recommending that you eliminate.
So if we eliminated C, we could pay for the lower lateral, and then someone could come in and get a grant to help pay for the upper lateral.
That's correct. And
Get the job done.
Yes.
And I would like to make one other clarification, just the way it's drafted is that the PSA pilot program is a 50-50 match with a maximum contribution on the behalf of, by the district for any particular property of $1,500. So it's not just a grant of $1,500, it's up to $1,500, but it's a 50-50 match as drafted, excuse me.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Clarifying question, please.
Asked. Well, I was just bringing it back for questions. I was seeing if staff had anything else
Oh.
they wanted to. Did you have anything else you guys wanted to talk about? Okay. Questions?
Another clarifying question. I believe that everything in this is really laid out where we as a sanitary district are going down the street and doing a wholesale improvement, and it absolutely makes sense to be efficient. What happens in a situation where someone, because they're doing a renovation or because there's a property sale or something, and there's an identified need for a new sewer lateral that might be upper and lower, but the town or the sanitary district is not going through the street? What's the deal, if you will, there?
Board Member Kuhnhart, the scenario you just described would mean that that property owner would be eligible for the private sewer lateral grant, 50% match, up to a maximum of $1,500. But that would be the only.
But if there's no digging of the street, that's going to be a $10,000 cost.
Could be. Yeah. The sewer lateral costs, the private sewer lateral replacement costs, vary widely depending on the property and the conditions and the length of the lateral and whether or not you need to pump water out while you're replacing it. There's a whole list of variables. So, they're not all the same.
Yep. Okay.
So, Peter, this is largely consistent, as I read it, from what other sanitary districts are already doing around us, right? I mean, this is what Ross Valley's doing.
Mhm.
This is what, and there's 11 sanitary districts, I think, in Marin County now, something like that.
Yeah, and a handful of them do it. I mean, the grant program, I think we found 3 districts that have a grant program similar to this. An adopted policy or a pilot program on the lower laterals is a little more unique. I think some towns and districts do it in practice, but because it is a big expenditure and because we have these big capital improvements, we wanted to do it in the form of a pilot program with all your blessings, so you're all aware of it.
But in terms of the requirements for when a sewer lateral replacement is required, I think
That's pretty
seems
uniform across
pretty
all the
consistent.
districts, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions? No. Okay. Then we open up to the public for comment on this. Yes, sir. Roy?
Roy Wolford, 37 Seawolf Passage. I sent an email out today, or actually two of them, in response. So I want to thank Peter for being responsive and answering my questions. And I want to thank Rebecca for being efficient and having copies of that email. So I'll hand them out right now.
We got it.
Yeah,
She shared already.
Ah, great. Okay, the thrust of the email is to make sure that we get the best deal for the property owners and the renters. And in order to do that, we need the town to be the single implementer. Back in 2005, when the sanitary fees went up, the program was, or at least it was proposed for the moral dilemma, that the sewer mains, appurtenances, laterals, and testing were going to be done by the town. So in 2005, the town said, hey, get ready, it's coming. And so we, in 2006, installed a clean out because the town said that's not what we're going to cover. So we've been waiting since 2006 to have the laterals or the mains and the laterals replaced in the testing. I mean, there can be no argument that the town can do testing much more efficiently in wide areas, an entire street. I've got to assume that we could get it set up so that the business or even the town that does the testing and inspection of the lateral can do it electronically. So rather than doing 6,000 pieces of paper back and forth between all of the sanitary district customers, let's get the sanitary district to manage that. In addition, let's just imagine that the town goes in, replaces the main and the lower lateral. So they're going to dig 2 holes right at the main and one on the house side of the sidewalk. So they're going to do 2 trenches. We're going to cut, right, the lateral on the side on the side of the sidewalk. They're going to install a link between the appurtenance, the main, the appurtenance, and they're going to have to couple together the old lateral. So here we got the old lateral. So what we've done? We've introduced another joint that can leak. So the property owner now, and then the town comes in, fills everything in. Property owner, 180 days later, has to go out and find a contractor. The contractor comes in, has got to redig the sidewalk hole, dig next to the foundation, install another lateral piece, which may or may not be the same material, has to couple that together, so now we have another joint. Every installation that I've seen over in Mariner Cove, they dig 2 holes down to the sewer and the appurtenance, and then outside the foundation. And then they run a breaker that breaks up the lateral, right, the existing lateral, and pulls through a continuous piece, one piece of pipe or sewer line. So I think the town really needs to take ownership and do 100% of the implementation and replacement of the infrastructure. That's the fair thing to do. It's cost effective, it's implementation efficient, and it simplifies the process. One other thing, if I could just comment on the pilot grant program. It indicates that the district will provide the grant to the property owner who does not pass the pressure test. I've been told that 98% plus of the laterals will not pass a pressure test. Why is that in there? Why can't it just be an inspection? An inspection, a visual inspection, camera down the line. It's going to see separations in the joints, breaks in the lateral. It will not pass a pressure test. Should only be an inspection required, not a pressure test.
Thank you,
Visual
Roy.
inspection. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Wolford a question before you leave?
Go ahead.
Mr.
Please do.
Wolford, the way I understand it in my overly simplified way, and Peter, you can correct me if I've got it wrong, is that right now our current laterals are in terrible condition. And
Agreed.
as they are perform work on it, something ought to be done for a variety of reasons. Okay.
Right.
And my understanding from the pilot program is that now, in addition to replacing the main, the town, for the next year or two, will also replace the lower lateral at our expense. Is that right? I'm sorry? The district, Okay.
Yes.
And that the additional thing to that pilot program includes a new proposal that the district will also pay 1/2 of the cost of replacing the upper lateral up to a total of $1,500. Is that right? Do you object? I mean, in your view, this is a good thing, a bad thing, or it's just inadequate? You think the entire cost ought to be replaced?
I don't disagree with that. There's a lot of issues, fine points we could get into.
But that's the specific thing we've got to figure out today.
Yes, yeah. So let's just take a look at you can't see the pictures here, but if you look at the email, you'll see a red line on the streets. And the laterals don't go down necessarily the middle of the street, so there's not an equal distance to each side of the property. And so that's unfair. And different streets are wider. You're going to get some streets that are 30 feet wide, others 39, and even wider. I think the thing that the town needs to do, and it gets to a concept I was thinking of, is you figure out a certain amount of the lateral that's inside the property line, the length of it, and say, okay, this is kind of the average, so the town is going to absorb that cost. Any length of lateral beyond that, then the property owner is responsible for it. But it's important that that all gets done at the same time. It's cleaner, it's faster, it really works. So some property owners may have a lateral that's 60 feet in length, others 500 feet in length. So I don't think it's fair to the rest of the customers in the district that they would have to pay or finance the longest private part of the lateral. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm trying to think it through.
I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if the 1,500 is right or not.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Do you have a question also?
Yes, is what you're saying is we should replace the whole lateral, and then the next question is we're going to argue over who's going to have to pay for it when. Is
That's up in the air. That's a coin flip right now. So the town needs to pay for, I like the private-public ownership principle.
Right.
So the town's responsible for everything up to the property line. And inside the property line, and I outline the reasons why that is in the emails, if you take a look at that. And that really seems to me to be the fairest approach. Town takes ownership. They're the sole implementer of this project. We don't want every individual customer getting their time frame in on it and how they're going to approach it, what materials are replaced, when the testing's going to be done.
Okay, in terms of the actual doing the work, you want the town to go from basically the edge of the house to the middle of the street.
Connect well to wherever the sewer main is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be one project.
Yes.
And then the second issue is how do we pay for it? And who
Right.
pays what?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's critical that I agree that we need to replace and enhance the infrastructure. There's no doubt about it. But the town needs to take the ownership and do it. I don't like just replacing the lower lateral and then leave the upper to be taken care of at a separate time. That's more expensive, more time consuming. It's just, and it's a lot of additional paperwork. Doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to the council.
I have a question
Wait,
for
is there any
Peter.
other public comment? No. No. Take that as a no. Then we're going to close public comment, and we'll bring it back to the council.
But even though public comment's closed, I can ask Peter a question.
Yes, you can ask questions.
And by the way, I think that I found a loophole in our rules, which says that our meeting ends at 9:30, but we're actually the sanitary district, so I think we're probably not subject to it.
So it would be my recommendation that at a future meeting, you consider adopting the same rules to apply to yourself so that we have the same rules of decorum and everything else.
Just
But you
because I'm
haven't,
keenly aware of the fact it's past 9:30.
but you haven't done that. You could, at the moment, decide whether or not you want to apply that rule for this particular at this particular
It
time
seems
or
superfluous
not.
at this point, but
Or
let's put it
not.
on a future agenda.
I think
right?
we just want to roll, right?
Okay.
Want to finish this? Yeah.
I just wanted to point out my consternation that it's past 9:30.
Sorry. Are you saying?
It's entirely my fault anyway.
Are you saying we have to take a vote then?
You do not have to take a vote. That
We don't
rule,
have-
that rule technically doesn't apply to the
Doesn't apply 'cause
sanitary
of the
district.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
So, Peter, something I didn't understand, and but that's being made clear to me, maybe from what Mr. Wolford was saying. I was equating an upper lateral with the portion of the line that would be on the owner's property, like past their property line. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, it's not. So it's the opposite. So if you read, we define private sewer laterals as well as upper and lowers in the ordinance that you all adopted last year. And the upper lateral typically is defined by the end of the public right-of-way. Typically, the back of sidewalk is our normal distinguishment.
Right.
The lower lateral is typically from the back edge of the sidewalk to the connection to the main.
No, but
general.
Okay, I'm not expressing myself clearly then. I had understood the upper lateral then, and that's consistent with the picture, which is that it's underneath that part of the property, which is probably on the owner's property, right? That's the way the picture looks, but what I understood from Roy was that that may not be accurate. Do I have that wrong?
No, I don't. It doesn't look inaccurate to me.
Okay, but what I understood from what Mr. Wolford was just saying was that this picture may not accurately reflect the distinction between an upper and lower lateral, and that, in other words, some upper laterals may extend far beyond the property line, but would still be considered an upper lateral. Is that incorrect?
Yes, I think the more pertinent distinguishment is that the private sewer lateral, the definition of a private sewer lateral is from the foundation of a building to the connection with the main, including the connection itself.
But I
Upper and lower.
right. But it made sense to me that, okay, it made sense to me that connection, to the extent it's on the owner's property, we would not take responsibility for, except for maybe up to half of $1,500 or something like that. And that's sort of the idea here, isn't it?
That's what's before you tonight.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of that, but I had I don't know,
That's okay.
right? Do you see, is there a disconnect?
I think the upper and lower lateral distinction is just one that we're creating, right?
It
Because
exists.
The property owner is
yeah.
responsible for the lateral from the house to the main, period.
Exactly.
We're creating an artificial distinction about an upper and a lower lateral, right?
Well, it's defined in the municipal code, but it's defined generally. It's not defined specifically.
Right.
So yeah, it is mildly arbitrary, and it coincides with where we're doing mainline work and pavement rehabilitation
But
work.
technically, the property owner is responsible for the whole lateral.
Correct.
From
And
the
will be,
house
even
to
if
the
we
main.
implement this project. They will continue to own and be required to maintain their entire private sewer lateral. They're just getting, under this program, a one-time repair of a very likely damaged lower lateral and a trigger to repair the upper. So the nice thing about this whole program is as we march around town and we investigate the state of our mains and the state of our pavement condition, over the next 10 or 15 years, through a program like this, we could really change 70 to 80% of our infrastructure and get it tight.
I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. I understand Mr. Wolford's concerns, but this strikes me as a very pragmatic way to begin to chip away at a gigantic problem in some incremental way. And I believe that's how you fix things. You don't try to hit a home run, you try to incrementally do it. I like the 1 or 2 year program because it gives us an option if this explodes into something that we can't financially handle. On the other hand, if we find out after testing it for a year or two that it's doable, we should continue it in perpetuity until all of the town's sewers are in reasonable shape. So it makes sense to me. But maybe I'm oversimplifying it.
Well, one question I had is, the contractor who's going to be putting in the upper lateral, will he have the opportunity, or will the homeowners have an opportunity to sit there and say, hey, just do the whole lateral? And I don't,
Board Member Andrews, they will, as long as it's before the end of our capital improvement project. So they're all getting notices. They're all going to be aware of this, what's happening on their property and on their street, and they're welcome to get a contractor to do the whole thing and to seek the $1,500 grant program. We would note that, and when we were replacing our main, part of our construction project would be to go in, detach the lateral that had just been replaced. We'll be able to visually inspect that it's in good working order, and then the sanitary district contractor will connect it back to the new main.
I'm
So
thinking
that's
the
not an
sanitary
issue.
district contractor, at the homeowner's request, go from the main to the house.
That's not something we've envisioned, and it's not something that we're proposing.
Okay.
The main reason is that the contractor that we hire will most likely be able and ready to work in the town right-of-way, and getting permission to work on private property is a whole nother issue. And then, so as mentioned, the definitions are available for upper and lower lateral, and the lower, for example, is defined as the portion of the private sewer lateral extending from the cleanout near the curb line to the sewer main, or from the curb line in the sewer main if there is no cleanout near the curb line. So we define it there, and it is consistent with the photo.
Okay.
Can I clarify one
Question?
thing?
Yes,
Oh.
please. Go ahead.
So, Peter, Director Brown, there is no situation in which a homeowner would be compelled to have a private sewer lateral pressure tested that has not been just repaired and inspected prior to that, right? Like, an inspection is always the first step.
Inspection is the first step, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And there are multiple triggers for inspections,
Right.
including a
Right.
CIP project.
Right. Okay.
Related small question. One of Mr. Wolfert's comments raised the question for me is a pressure test always necessary? Is that?
Yeah, it's. I think an analogous way to put it is, should you test your cholesterol if you want to know if you have high blood pressure or good blood health? The answer is yes. It's an industry standard. We don't visually inspect with cameras or with really savvy construction managers. You can't see every crack. You can't see every joint. Air pressure of a small number of pounds per square feet tells us if there's a leak. And I can tell you right now, with the private sewer lateral ordinance that we adopted last year, we have pressure tested every single sewer that's been replaced, every single sewer lateral, and they've all passed the test when they've been replaced. So
When
we
they've
don't.
been replaced.
When they've been replaced, and when we inspect them prior to replacement, none of them could pass a pressure test. So the program is working, and so is the standard of pressure testing.
I've actually attended, I don't even know how many sewer lateral inspections at this point, because it's now a standard part of real estate. And I can tell you, pretty much the standard in the industry is if someone says a pressure test is required, at this point, nobody does it anymore. They just figure you're gonna replace the line, because nobody passes a pressure test, right? I mean, it's like 7% or something like that. It's something ridiculously low. And the cost of doing the pressure test is like $800 or $900. And at that point, it becomes just like,
Just
you're
replace
gonna
it.
fail, just replace the line and figure out what you need to do. So pressure tests are, I don't think I've ever seen one or used one, because people just write it off and say it's not worth doing.
Well, I think President Ravazio, what you're referring to as is prior to. So what we do is we pressure test after
Well,
once
after
it's
it's
been
replaced,
replaced.
it's a
Correct.
different thing, right? Yeah,
that's
but
when it
when you're running the
typically
pressure
occurs.
test to see if there's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, all these guys, I don't know how many sewer companies I've worked with, but they'll just say, you're gonna fail. They'll tell you that up front, that you're gonna fail the pressure test if it's an old line.
And what that means to us is every lateral that fails a pressure test is very likely spilling raw sewage into residential neighborhoods. So that's our problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Although, isn't part of our problem also that rainwater's getting into the line and it's going into the sanitary district and needs to be treated before it goes into the bay, and it's costing us money?
That's a problem that occurs, I would say, on average, once every year or two, sometimes once every 5 years during a heavy deluge. The leaking of raw sewage typically happens every flush.
Yeah.
So those are different concerns.
That is such a graphic way to put it.
I am much more concerned about what's happening on a daily
against
basis than
rainwater.
what happens with what we call
Right.
infiltration, and it impacts CMSA. But it only does so during heavy events and on rarer occasions.
Right.
Have we ironed out where we stand on 3C, the double dipping clause?
And the director, thank you, the director and I may have found a middle ground if you would like to hear that for consideration. But for
Okay.
section C, the disqualification, if you remove town in line 3 and then change the number 10 years to 1 year, I think that meets both of our concerns.
Oh, because then they can do like a sidewalk or something that's not this.
And then they also can't take a single project within a year and triple dip with grant funds, which would be a concern of the district manager. So,
Okay, I'll make a motion unless you guys want to keep talking about it.
What's that?
I'll make a motion unless you want to keep talking about it.
Any,
I'll second the motion unless.
So my motion is that we approve resolution number 02/2019 and direct staff as implemented with the modification appearing in the resolution at number 3 sub C, Ray, disqualification, to delete the words "or town" from the sentence in that sub C and delete or replace the number 10 with the number 1. At the second to last.
Second.
there's a motion and a second?
Second. With amendment.
Board Member Bailey?
Yes.
Board Member Beckman?
Yes.
Board Member Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Vice President Andrews?
Yes.
President Ravazio?
Yes. Okay. Item 6B. Is that right? Review and comment on the draft, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong. Am I right?
This is the capital improvement.
Yes, it is, capital improvement with funnel, yes, sorry.
President Ravazio, you may feel like it's deja vu, and it is,
It is.
because
We're doing capital improvements again.
we do. So this is a very similar. It should be a little quicker because there's only one tab. This tab is included in the CIP document, but this is really honing in on the capital projects for Sanitary District Number 2. This is your draft list. We broke it into the 2 categories. The first one is the Regional Water Quality Control Board required CIP projects as part of our MPDS permit, our National Pollution Elimination Discharge permit. We have to get those projects done, and they're on target to meet our deadlines. And then other CIP projects are listed there for you. A couple of those first 2 are underway. And then we have some pretty critical ones for the district moving forward. And again, we'll be asked to adopt this at a later meeting in June, but this is just your time to review or comment or give us any directions on what you see.
Okay, so are there any questions for Peter about the proposed CIP?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Peter, I don't feel comfortable understanding whether this makes sense. Can you represent to me that you've thought this thing through and that the prioritization here is right to you?
Sure.
Why not?
Board Member Bailey. So, okay, if we look at the easy part, items 1 through 4.
Right, I get it.
Those are done. Those are required. In terms of priorities for projects 1 and 2, your board has already awarded construction contracts to both of those.
Okay.
So those are in contract and under construction. Those are clearly priorities. When you look at item 3, the seismic safety is something that can be moved, and that's a suggestion you can make. If you want us to do an assessment of our air release valves in the next 2 years, we can try to work it into our work plan, but something else might not have to give. And then the next items, the air release valves and the isolation valves, we're going on these. These are really important. And so we're planning on allocating those $500,000 amounts in each of the next 2 years. Old Landing Pump Station needs a new standalone generator. The current one is working, but this isn't a pressing need, and so it's in the out years. The flow meter vault is underway, and so we're looking at making sure that gets replaced, and so it's in the near year, excuse me. And then the Meadow Suite projects really need to get designed and built, and the reason why they're high priority really has to do with our February. What happens on Meadow Suite is it ends up carrying a good deal of the Chapman neighborhood, Oakdale, even Tamalpais, Menke Park. A lot of that sanitary district effluent flows into the Meadowsweet main line and goes across near the car dealerships under 101 and over to the Paradise Pump Station. I believe that that particular line is not only in a state of disrepair, it's old, it's cracked. It also is lacking capacity. So we're looking at a capacity increase there because it needs to be a little more airtight and it needs to have more capacity. Walking down the list, you'll see that the variable frequency drive is slated for regular use in each of the next. This is for the Paradise Pump Station. This is a key piece of equipment that we're going to replace every single year. We're going to keep replacing them on all the pumps at Paradise Pump Station. Golden Hind and Seawolf Pump Station, that's a new pump station or evaluation if a new pump station is viable. And we're waiting on the climate adaptation plan to push that back. The biggest ticket item that you'll see is the pre-paving sewer rehab project. So, it's probably the last one I'll go into the nuts and bolts on, and that just has to do with looking at our pavement schedule and ensuring that all of the underground infrastructure below the multi-million-dollar pavement projects is in good working order. And so, to some extent, we have a good idea of where our mains need work, but what we did with the paving project is we said, get a camera down there. Every place we're replacing pavement, let's take a look at the main line. What are the materials? We did verification. We did the inspection of our own infrastructure as we require private property owners to do. And it was very clear that multiple parts of many of our upcoming road rehab and Tamla Vista Complete Streets projects needed mainline repairs. So that's the big ticket item in this budget.
Okay. After you make, I'm sorry, can I ask one other question?
Sure.
After you replace something like that, do you then, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
After you replace something like that, do you then create a schedule, what I would call a reserve analysis about when it needs to be done again? Like, do these things last for 50 years or 10 years or something like that? Because apparently whoever had your job 50 years ago didn't do such a thing.
Yeah, and that's that speaks more to like availability of materials than it does and state of the practice than it does anything else. So what we'll do with most of these main lines is we'll use really strong materials like cast iron or a type of hard plastic that is very corrosive averse. So we expect to get the 30 to 50 or 80 if you use the cast iron material. We expect a long useful life and not to have to invest in this infrastructure for a long time.
Like 30 to 50 years?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Comments?
Public
I don't
comment.
see any public comment. Any public comment? No? Okay, then we'll close public comment. Bring it back to the council, actually the board.
There's no need for a
Direction.
motion.
Any direction, further direction needed?
So directed.
Says it looks great. Okay, then move on to the next item, district manager and board member reports. District manager report.
I have none.
Board member reports?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Review of draft agenda.
Love it.
Adjournment. Thank you.
Adjourn.
Okay.